Welcome to the Junto Men's Podcast, where we take a deep dive into all things relating to men. We explore how to go from good to great, from high performers, and also aim to provide a shining light if you're experiencing darkness in your life. Grab a pen and paper and enjoy the ride.
I think we don't talk about it as much. It's probably the opposite. I think because women have got a cycle, they're a lot more. They have like a direct barometer of how they're going. Like they can tell straight away if they're irregular, if they're skipping, if they're having heavy. Like, they're very obvious, right, when they're in balance. And because of that, I'll normally get at talks. I'll normally get more females coming to me saying, "Hey, something is out of whack," right? Like your partners might have said, I'm feeling hormonal this month, or I'm feeling. Guys don't. We don't really pay much attention. We're lucky in that we're a bit more stable. In terms of like hormonally speaking, we have less physical hormones to worry about, and they tend to go more in a certain direction. But I guess what's become really big is the awareness that I think that a lot of environmental factors are drastically lowering testosterone, drastically lowering sperm production, and nothing is actually increasing it, which is kind of alarming. Because normally it declines with age, right? That's a pretty standard concept. So it's meant to decline at 1 to 2% a year after the age of about 25. I mean, that's its natural linear rate of decline, but it gets antagonized. It really gets smashed by stress, really gets smashed by a few environmental factors too. And it's a lot of things that lower testosterone, but not a lot that props it up. But the tricky part is because it's gradual, like 1 to 2% a year, you don't feel like a percent over a year, you don't really notice, right? But then you compound that with stress, you compound that with inflammation, injuries, you compound that with like environmental things like different chemicals that also affect our hormones as well, and it gets really quickly more like 5-10% when it starts lowering and lowering. And we were talking about before, I suppose mutual friends of ours have been very big on, or even you guys, like self-awareness space, right, and trying like mental health and really driving like what makes you as men motivated, driven, wanting, chasing reward, driving towards something. Well, dopamine's a pretty big thing that's spoken about a lot now. Well, dopamine's, I suppose, the thing that's responsible for driving us towards reward, driving us towards motivation, driving us towards feeling driven, like that real let's go get it sort of vibe. That's associated with high dopamine, and high dopamine is correlated to high testosterone. So we have this societal picture where the modern lifestyle is declining testosterone at an alarming rate. With it goes dopamine too. So then all of a sudden the symptom picture, like you said, bloods can say one thing, but the symptom picture of it becomes very, very subtle, but very easy to identify. So like I guess that's the symptom part. What's the relevant things you can do without bloods to look for if testosterone is suboptimal? Lack of motivation is a huge one. Lack of motivation, lack of that just feeling of drive, just like not really feeling really driven, right? You'd also look at muscle mass. It might take you a bit longer to recover than you used to. You might find like muscle soreness sticks around a bit longer than it used to before. You might find you build more body fat, like you hold a bit more body fat than you used to, and particularly it's usually lower stomach and lower back and lower chest starts piling on. Which is a real kicker. Then typically the stress piece starts flaring up a bit, and that usually bleeds into poor sleep. So stress is probably the main antagonizer of testosterone that we have. And stress isn't just mental stress, like with the burn of tonight. It's actually, it can be like stressors in the body. So it might be inflammation. It might be an injury. It might be bad gut health. It might be, there's also the actual stresses too, like families, lives, parents, kids, commitments, all the other stuff we do, overtraining, undereating. There's stress, some stresses are good on our body, like for example, ice baths, right? That's a short-term, acute, big stressor that causes a positive adaptation. But the problem is, because we have all these sources of stress, they stack. So no one thing's an issue, but if you have like 20 small stresses between kids, family, work, jobs, text calls, emails, work and training, all this stuff stacks. And all of a sudden, a normal sort of behavioral pattern of stress hormone starts becoming quite a chronically elevated stress hormone. Now that then plays into the age decline, that then plays into the environmental factors, the pollutants, the things that drop testosterone too, and really pushes it down. So I guess like if you look at the biggest one that I see is like the big crux that no one really talks about is the stress piece. And I think particularly because we don't really, we're not always encouraged to talk about stress, I guess, as men. Like I don't find like we ever really get it pulled out of us. It's almost like encouraged. The more we can tolerate, the better we are at whatever we do, which is like, it's literally what makes us successful is how much stress can you tolerate, right? Like how much of a burden can you put on your shoulders and carry for how long will mean you will be more successful. So it's almost like encouraged, right? But the tricky part with stress and rewarded, man, 100% you're rewarded for it. It's like, congrats, dude. Yeah, like I see it all the time, and like I try and make a point now of going like pointing out how hard it is to do it, like how hard the stress is, how much of an impact it has on you.
Even on your post that you put up yesterday or today about when someone commented, the 14-hour work week is like, builds the resilience. And I'm like, yeah, It kind of does, but it's probably not the fucking best thing for us.
It also breaks it. It like breaks physio. So like, again, and that's the big one. So the things that I see like that are really big for guys that like do it are definitely like the stress piece is almost the main overriding factor. Because the environmental stuff, it's sort of hard because I used to go like get quite caught up in the weeds of like how plastics and BPAs and like things can really bombard us. And I'll give you a few little pointers on those, but they're sort of also like a guaranteed thing. So it's also tricky to sort of go, well, that's there. So try and build resilience in the body and try and build resilience to stress is probably the best thing you can do to try and buffer it. Because testosterone, even though it gets smashed by test, it's on this big pendulum. So as soon as stress increases, test goes down, test goes up, stress goes down. It's actually quite protective. You can flip the script on it. So stress goes up and it does dampen it. But if you can boost test, it will by default lower stress too. So one can offset the other one, right? So the stress piece is where I normally do a lot of work with us though, because I think trying to frame it differently, just thinking like less about mental stress, more about sources of stressors in the body. So like alcohol consumption, cracker one, right? Like we all think we might have a stress day and we might think alcohol consumption is an example of something that lowers stress, might be one. You drink and it takes the edge off, right? But alcohol in itself actually acutely increases stress hormones, acutely disrupts sleep, even though we think, I switch off heats better, I sleep heats better. Well, if you look at the sleep data, it's trash. REM goes down, so like deep sleep goes down, and 30% of testosterone is made during sleep. So it's this negative feedback loops, but it's the short-term reward one. I'm so stressed right now, I can't calm my mind down, alcohol, right? Something that will numb it, something that will distract it, something that'll take the edge off, right? So, but sadly, it just contributes to its own little thing. So, like the way that it's meant to work in the body in a perfect world would be a little like we have like rhythms for how things can work. So if we look at like we're going to time beautifully the other day. So if you've got like AM, PM, and so on, so you get night and day and so on. So your circadian rhythm, right, is actually tied to your stress. Your stress hormone is like the most important thing because your body's big priority is survival. Like survival is its big thing. So it'll always override survival to any other biological function, anything, reproduction particularly. And reproduction is where testosterone comes from, right? So it's meant to spike in the morning. And this is where like why you guys feel so good after an ice bath, right? That's an acute stressor. So that causes a massive surge in cortisol, and then we return to baseline, we go on. What's meant to happen is we're meant to have a stressor like that in our body. And then our nervous system is meant to be able to go, all right, cool, stress done. Let's switch that off and return to normal, and away we go. And it should return to baseline. You carry on your day. Tricky part is that worked when we were cavemen, but it sucks now because we don't just have one stressor anymore. We have like a million things, right? So instead of going just up and then down, it tends to look more like this with people now. And what this does, if stress is a thing, it still follows the same pattern. You eventually wake up in the morning. At some point, you'll start getting going in the morning. At night, though, you start finding it a while to switch off. So you'll find like, because this is linked to adrenaline too, right? One of your survival hormones is adrenaline. So you get the evening here, and you're like, oh, you get home. This is when you get home from work, and you might be physically buggered, but your head just won't stop. And you're like to the point where you have to like pick up a phone and scroll, or put a TV on just to numb it out a bit. Like your head just won't slow down, even if you're physically cooked. Like you might be like exhausted physically, and call it tired but wide. And then you get to bed, and your mind just starts talking to you. And you put your head in its pillow, and it's just like, oh, hey, I'm going to talk about your day now. That's like this part, right? Because it's still high. So the tricky part is, like we said before, that alcohol thing, it has to be low. We evolve with it being low so you can get good deep sleep and REM sleep and all the good stuff, which supports healthy testosterone, supports growth hormone, supports all the stuff we need to have healthy bones and muscle mass and brain and protection, all the good stuff. But because that never really gets low enough, we never get a good deep quality sleep either. So like the big catcher's mitt to like the hectic day of high stress should be that deep epic sleep, but we never get the deep epic sleep because we're always got this background noise of the day, right? And this is characterized by, you might find like you got a few of you guys have been like got wearables, which is sick. So if any of you like track your sleep, if you look at it, or if you wake up, there's several wake events throughout the night. So if you guys get up and go to the toilet at all, that's a really good one. But usually everyone thinks it's a hydration thing. It has nothing to do with how much water you drink before bed. It's cortisol, right? And stress hormone. Other things are when you do sleep, less deep sleep and REM sleep. So if you are tracking, look at it and you'll see usually less deep sleep and REM sleep as a result of it. When you do wake up as well, you'll either wake up at like 3 a.m. and just be like on. And you feel like it's like morning, you check your clock, it's 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. or something. It's usually between, this little window here is usually between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And if you feel like you just wake up during the night, you go to the bathroom and you just can't get back to sleep, That's this. You might feel like it's morning. Like I've had this heat where I'll wake up and you'll swear it's like time to get up for work and it's 2 a.m. You're like, what? Like but it's 100%. It's this early coming out of sleep. You haven't actually gone to a deep sleep, and then you're coming out of it early. Now, the tricky part is then in the morning, because you either surge here or alternatively it takes you forever to pick up. So this is where you see friends who are like not morning people. You've heard that people like, oh, I'm not a morning person. I can't face the world till 10 a.m. and after 3 coffees and stuff. It's because their cortisol doesn't pick up at all. So they don't get that feeling we had after the ice bath the other day. That's an example of when cortisol spikes strongly. Energy, adrenaline, you're alert, right? Well, imagine if you didn't get that until like 11 a.m. That's when you're dragging around feeling crappy, right? But that's the example of like someone who's in burnout. When someone's in you feel it at work when you start getting just bashed and you get towards the end of the week and you just start getting up groggier and groggier and groggier. It takes you longer and longer and more caffeine to get going. That's sort of burnout explained, yeah? But the kicker on that is, I suppose, at any one point, that going up also causes an immediate decrease in tests. And testosterone is like the big thing for all of us for optimizing anything, right? Like mood, all of it. So what we try and do is look at things like symptoms of that to see if it's actually relevant, and then tie that into how that lowers tests. But a lot of the symptoms of it are those things, not like tired but wired, wake up a few times throughout the night, waking up and either taking ages to get going, or when you do wake up, you wake up a bit earlier than you should ideally, and you might try and go back to sleep, then you find it hard, you might wake up groggy later. And then throughout the day, poor short-term memory, really common. Bit of goldfish memory, like you put your keys down, you forget where you put them, you write a text, you look away, you just forget what you're writing. That's like a classic one. A bit foggy-headed. And then muscle mass-wise, we find we actually start breaking down muscle. Like you find it very difficult to build anything, and particularly on extremities. So if you find it hard to build quads, delts and arms, that's all stress. That's very much a stress thing. And then in the body fat, it puts it all around the midsection as well. So all these symptoms are similar to what low test is, like that, and that's similar to the symptom of low testosterone, which is the same sort of thing. Stubborn body fat, slow metabolism, start looking at food and putting on weight, holding water, start poor recovery, you start to stress, you start to poor sleep, and it's this self-perpetuating cycle because the poor sleep causes the more stress the next day. The more stress causes the poor sleep. Poor sleep makes more stress, and you get this rabbit hole, right? And this is where people get caught in burnout. I normally see them at talks I do when they're like properly cooked and they've like done shift work for 10 years, you know, or they've been a month, like busy parents, 3-4 kids plus a stressful job, and they've had years of chronically high stress, you know, and it gets them. Now the scary part is overlay this to like a bit of a trend line, right? So if you've got testosterone levels over time, that's the 1970s. That was, they did that in 2011. So it went from, let's go total testosterone, right? At this point here, it was sitting at about 650 was your total test. Now it was sitting at 347. So it's got a 50% decrease in only 40 years. And it's only meant to decline at like 2% a year. And it's declining at a very, very aggressive rate. So it's nearly halved in the last, and this is the mean, not just like old dudes only. This is like the whole population on average have declined 50% in total testosterone. And people wonder why the suicide rate, like 75% of suicide is men, 75% of depression is men, 70% of homelessness is men. So like a lot of bad stuff happens to guys. And like we see, and even look at like sperm production, fertility is like trash right now, right? So if you look at the sperm production line, typically it should decline again at a linear rate. It should just go down very slowly over time. Unfortunately, again, actually it was the same year, it's the 70s. So in the 70s, right, that was sitting at 99 million per mil versus in like, that was 2020. Yeah, that was in 2020. That was down to 47. So, yeah. So again, halved. So sperm production's halved, testosterone's halved in like a 30, 40 year span. It's like super fucking alarming, but no one, and it makes so much sense now when you see how much higher the average stress is to the person now than what it used to be. Then you look at like, there are some environmental things I'll touch on briefly, but there's this massively alarming trend of like dropping tests, dropping sperm production, dropping fertility, which then leads to dropping dopamine, which leads to higher stress, leads to poor body composition, like, and it just causes this soup, and it's really hard to get out of because you're like in this funk, you're in a really shit headspace, but then the chemicals won't let you get out of the headspace because you're in a high stress environment, you're in low dopamine. If you're in a low testosterone environment, you're in low dopamine. So you lose all that drive, you lose all that reward, you lose all that feeling of wanting to get yourself out of a shit spot. And then you're super burnt out because your stress has got you in a bad place. So like you put it all together, it's like, this is a really bad place to sit, right? So I guess the main piece I see is some of the environmental stuff, like, and really low hanging fruit, like super simple ones for people who are actionable. Plastics, ideally, like steel bottles, awesome. That's like best case scenario. Plastics have molecules that mimic estrogen. That's the other missing piece. Alcohol and soy products and plastics, they have molecules that look really similar to estrogen in them. And so when they go in the body, they actually act like estrogen too. So if you think about estrogen as our sort of opposite end of the spectrum, testosterone's muscle mass, building muscle, all good stuff. Estrogen is very important, but if there's too much estrogen, we get in a bad place too. Then you start holding that really stubborn body fat, really overly emotional, overly stressed, all that stuff, right? So not only is there lowering this, we also have increasing estrogen too. So it's a bit of a kicker. We're in a bit of a hard one, right? So what do? Ideally, stress. I tackle it first because I think it's like the thing that everyone has. Like stress is like the big common denominator that almost everyone can identify with in some form, whether it's like mental stress, work stress, physical stress, financial stress, training wise. I think that could be as simple, guys, as like even if you're like recently I knew I was going to go into a hectic period at work. So I just dropped off training for 5 days a week to 4. Because I knew I wasn't going to be able to recover from it anyway. So you got to look at positive adaptations to change, right? So like it might even be make your training volume match your day. Like if you've got a wild period of time coming up at work, first block of the year is usually pretty hectic in the fitness industry. I don't know how it is for all you guys, but it's pretty messed up, right? So I go, well, we're not going to recover anyway. So let's not bury ourselves too hard. Let's get ourselves some breathing room, And then like stuff you can do, things like you're doing already, like recovery modalities are really important. The breath work, the meditation piece, the like ice baths for recovery, they're really good. But also in the morning, super simple stuff. Because what we're trying to do is just recreate, we're talking about stress, and stress is the main one that we can do actual things for. All you want to do is just get that chronically high line down. So what we're trying to do, so we're trying to make the curve go up in the morning so we get energy, feeling we had out the ice bath. And we want to lower it at night so we don't feel tired but wide. We actually switch off and sleep. We actually get home and go, oh, cool. Because what we should have, the lucky thing we have that women don't, estrogen is a bit of a kicker because it actually blocks the off switch of stress. So estrogen has its own because they're meant to have gut instinct and fear and intuition because it's protective, right? Like the mother's intuition, that's literally their chemistry blocking the off switch to stress. Whereas men, we have the off switch to stress. That's why we can take things and go like deal with it and then switch off. But the stress thing stops us doing that. So we try and reinforce this curve and make that easy. So in the morning, sun exposure is epic. Sun exposure is pretty good. If it's like a bit overcasty, it takes about 20 minutes, like 15, 20 minutes of sun exposure. If it's like actually bright light, you literally need 5 minutes. Just get out, just get it right on your eyes. And it like starts that part of the curve off. Because then your brain goes, oh, it's daytime. Cortisol on, and it starts that curve. And it also sets your bedtime because as soon as you see sun in the morning, there's a clock in your body. And it says between 12 to 15 hours from this point of first seeing sun, I'm going to fall asleep later. So it actually sets your bedtime later too. So if you see sun at 7 a.m., 12 to 15 hours, between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., you'll fall asleep. So it also, whereas if you don't see sun, if you like get up and it's dark, then go to work to an office, there's all artificial light and it's closed off, you don't go outside, you don't get light till 9, 10, 11, 12. It pushes that circadian rhythm heaps out and it starts shifting this thing like that. And people wonder why they're night owls and they're awake till midnight every night, like they can't wind down till 2 a.m. It sort of shifts the curve a bit. So morning, sun exposure, that's really good. Exercising if you can, exercise in the morning is great too. It's like, you got to be realistic too with kids and family and whatever. But if you can, train in the morning is really good because what it does is it spikes that cortisol for you. It spikes that in the right direction for you. And then I suppose it's the opposite in the evening. So the morning is more caffeine. So caffeine, stimulants, training, get up, get moving. Just wake up, even go for a walk, doesn't matter. Just have to get blood going. Just get the body liberating energy. And then we get to the sort of midday point, our caffeine. We want to start minimizing that after about, I'll say 2 p.m. is the cutoff, really. Probably max 2 p.m. So anything after about 2, we need to cut caffeine if we can. Just because it has a half-life, its full elimination time is about 8 to 10 hours. So if we have a coffee at 1 p.m., it doesn't leave your system between 9 and 11 p.m. So it's like there till like midnight, stimulating your system in the background. So yeah, cut caffeine after 2. And then ideally nighttime is all about minimal light exposure. Because if we see lights, our mind goes, oh, cool, it must be daytime. Cortisol, ping. And that's why you can get home buggered and you get in bed and you start scrolling. And then you're like, it's 2 a.m. You're like, what happened? Or you put a movie on the laptop and you're like, you look away and you're like, oh, crap, it's midnight. Because that light keeps you thinking it's daytime. So that's the other one as well. minimize lights at night, get it down, wind it down, minimize stimulus, less music, less screen time, put like smart mode on your phones. Like every phone has a smart mode on it where you can like put it onto night mode and it kills a lot of blue light off it. It's my phone. That might work. Yeah, it is. So like if you just go to brightness settings on it, little sun, night mode. So much more, it makes the heat's more orange. See, it's more orange. Takes a lot of that blue light out of it. Everything has that, like laptops, screens, tablets, everything has that. And it like cuts out a heap of that light. So if you're gonna if you do have to do emails at night, or you do have to do calls or texts, whatever, just try and blue light as best you can. And as low as you can see it, ideally where you're at. So pretty every smartphone I would see it is hold down and then just hold the little sun, and you can set it too. So you can set that for like if you want to. Yeah, it's super handy. Yeah. What do you do? So, yeah, so slot down and you do a little. There you go. Oh. We'll help you set yours then. We'll work on that one. We'll figure it out later.
That's completely different.
Yeah, that's a good one. So essentially, what we're trying to do is recreate that up and down, that'll lower stress. Next part is eliminate some environmental stuff. So soy products, not our best friend. Also looking at plastics wise, ideally if you can drink out of glass or steel, that's great. But also like bodybuilding was my background, so I used to always microwave everything in Tupperware. Everything was in plastic, right? Like everything. I'd always have all my meals walking around, 5, 6 Tupperware things just stacked everywhere, and so microwaving it. As soon as you microwave it, but releases those molecules into the food, and that all acts as estrogen in the body, right? So I was like, yeah, it's a huge extra burden that disrupts your hormonal profile that you don't even really think about, but it's super easy to eliminate. You just replace it with either glass, like actual Tupperware, or you just put it on a plate, take it to work, whatever. And it's the same as like plastic water bottles. If you're leaving the car on a hot day, same thing, heats up, leaches into the water, and we're just drinking hormone disrupting chemicals, right? So yeah, like steel, ideally, glass, really good, ceramics, really good. Anything but plastic is a big one. And then the final easy elimination, soaps. Like if you look at back at your like soaps, shampoos, conditioners, most of your standard daily washables, right? Like if you look at the average shampoo, like when I was in a hotel last night just for a lull, I had to read, and it was like 29 chemicals in the shampoo. The conditioner was 36, and then the body soap was like 22. So there's like nearly 100 chemicals in those three. And you wouldn't even think twice about that. You just go, oh yeah, body soap, sweet, cool, shampoo, conditioner. 100 fucking chemicals. 100 in like one exposure. But how's your body meant to deal with that? Because the same thing that deals with that, if you look at how your body works, if you've got like, happy old mate trying to survive society, right? You've got the 100 odd chemicals to deal with. Then you also got everything that you eat, everything that you drink, everything that you absorb through skin. Try and deal with. That's cool. Then also, that all goes through your detoxification system, right? So it has to detoxify everything that ever comes at you ever. Food, drink, everything. But your detoxification system also helps balance hormones. So it's like super busy mopping up all the shit that we have exposed to us. And then it's also trying to like balance its own internal, like hormonal profile too. So the thing that's balancing us is buggered because it's overwhelmed. And then also getting impacted by stress too. So what we do, we eliminate the stress, we try and put some things in to make our day suit that. We try and cut out, that's the easiest one. Because we're not going to stop eating and drinking, right? So those two are fixed. So the chemicals, what I did, like honestly, man, there's like really basic soaps. You can just go, okay, well, look, like at Woolies is only like one brand, it's like a goat's milk soap, or it's like you go to markets, people like handmade soaps and stuff. You look at the back of them there, they're literally just like 2 or 3 things. It's heaps better. But there's some that were really scary. Like there's one, tetrasodium was one that was really bad. Tetrasodium is a known carcinogen with no known safe lethal like dose of tolerance. It's like it is known and proven to cause cancer at almost any exposure rate, and it's in almost every soap, conditioner, and chemical because we don't regulate like the FDA does. Like in Europe, they regulate it so strictly. There's only a list of like 21 allowable chemicals in cosmetics. In the US, it's something like 2,200. Like and then we're even sloppier. So like there's just no regulation on it. But a lot of them are like they cause like birth defects and tumors and carcinogens, and they're like massively problematic. So like the best thing I ever did was cut out shampoo, conditioner, and soaps, and just replace. Yeah, sun cream's super estrogenic too, hey? Super estrogenic. So it'll boot up estrogen too. Sunscreen's a real kicker, actually. There's some good ones though. I'll try and find some. I had a really cool meme somewhere with like good sunblocks on it. But yeah. And sun exposure is linked to like the weird part, sun exposure, right? Vitamin D is a big lacking piece in tests. 40% of even the Aussie population is thought to be vitamin D deficient. So, because things can stop you absorbing it, even if you have a lot of sun time, things like stress and inflammation and poor gut health and high body fat, things can stop you absorbing that vitamin D as well. So heaps of sun time is your best friend. It's weird. Everyone goes, "Oh, sun's going to kill you" and stuff. We're in a bad place with the equator, but like there's literally a really cool graph that if it goes like sun exposure. It shows so there is what was it? It was like sun exposure was on that on there. So that's sun time in the sun versus like mortality, right? Like rate of death, right? And it was like inversely correlated. The higher the sun exposure, the lower the cause of mortality. And it went the opposite way. The less sun exposure, the higher the cause of mortality. So it's like people who had minimal sun time in the sun, which I guess is logically thinking about how we evolved, right? You would just be out in nature all the time and having a good life, and But people who spent minimal time in the sun had all cause mortality, heart disease, like everything was higher. Their chance of death was much, much higher. So sunlight's actually heaps good. And sunscreen blocks a lot of the beneficial parts of it, vitamin D and all that. And we actually build up a bit of a tolerance just to UV exposure as well in our skin. We can't do that if we block it. So yeah, sunscreen, and it's also full of heaps of stuff. So pull that out, and then your basics. If you just did like a soap, like a real handmade basic ass like market soap, or you can get 1 or 2 brands at Woolies, but definitely look for that tetrasodium one. Yeah, that's an ask one. So tetrasodium. I think they have a few forms of it, but usually it starts with that. That one's an ask one. There's also some benzenes and stuff, but that's one that's in almost everything that I found. And like literally finding one brand of Woolies didn't have that. So yeah, that's a mean one. So cut that out too. So if you cut out all these things, your body can sort of balance itself out, because it starts going, I don't have to deal with 100 chemicals a day. I can just start basically working on, trying to balance out my internal system. More sun exposure, really, really good. Less stress. Using the life hacks to try and do more movement, exercise things, get that quarter to up in the afternoon, less light, less caffeine, less stimulants, putting our phones on smart mode, getting our sleep down, and we're good. Yeah, and then finally, I guess nutrition is the final piece. Make sure we're eating enough. Heaps of people undereat. Do anyone do meal plans before? Has anyone, you guys done any sort of like calories, looking at food, anything like that? Yeah. Do you guys count at the moment, or yeah? Yeah. Sick. Heaps good. Where do you do you track? Do you have a plan? What do you do?
Track. And my goal is 1,700 calories.
Oh mate, we need to get that up. Hey, we need to get that up.
Hearing you say that probably explains why I'm hungry all the time.
Oh mate, 1,700.
Short. It's a short.
Oh, so it's for a reason, like you're not always. Oh, okay.
Short-term goal.
Yep.
But normally I've just changed it to kilojoules to calories. I was doing 8,700 kilojoules.
Yeah, okay, so like two or something like 2,122.
Still in the low, probably like around 3,000 calories.
That's a bit better. That's a bit better. That's getting there. How often are you training a week at the moment? Are you
4 or 5 days?
Yeah, sure. Interesting. Gotcha. And you were as well with calories? What are you tracking, man? Are you?
It was 2,200. So 2,200, because I've calculated that to be with my maintenance. Yeah, it was about a 250 calorie deficit with my activity throughout the day.
Yep.
So
are you doing an office job or
the office job?
Yep.
So yeah, training usually about 4 or 5 days a week.
Yep. 22. You'd be in Perth City at 2,200, wouldn't you? That'd be.
Yeah. Huh? Well, I was getting used to it, but it was like, once again, it was a goal. It's just to hit short term, because I was just noticed you start to put like a bit of body fat on there. You don't want to reduce it. Yeah, when I'm in that deficit, I notice I can drop pretty quickly. It doesn't take me long just to get rid of it. But yeah, quickly notice it, because I'm 35 soon. Noticing I'm hitting that, but yeah, once everything you're saying as well, just on that, like the sleep and everything's really piss poor. Like I'm probably averaging about 6 hours the last 2 weeks or so. And starting, and I noticed like nothing's really changed my eating. If anything, I've been eating less, but noticing body fat's coming on a bit more. So
has anyone found that with eating? When they diet, they find it hard. They actually get to a certain point and they get stubborn. Does anyone know that?
Yeah.
I have a very set point. If I go below, it's about a 500 calorie deficit. It just goes, nah, stop. It doesn't make any sense. It does. You should, like, if you're in a calorie deficit, you should think you should only burn fat. But if your calorie demand's here and you're eating here for a period of time, which is normally 2 to 4 weeks, it will burn the difference. But over time, usually after about the 4 to 6 week mark, it actually downregulates metabolism to match it. It's a real prick. The body's.
So it does do that.
Now, interestingly,
Is that your body just
What
going
I've
on
tried
fear
for
mode though? Yeah.
the last 3 years.
Yep.
I can't get down to the gold weight, which is 100 kilos.
yeah, interesting.
Doctor reckons I should be 87.
Oh, that's bullshit. Yeah. The BMI is a relative thing too. As soon as you pick up a dumbbell, you just wipe that, like that concept. But
Your scan showed really good.
Muscle mass, body balance overall, and I got to 100 once, only for about 3 months.
Yep.
3 years ago. Then I would-
yeah, interesting.
And I'm all or nothing guy.
Yep.
So as soon as I break my fast or whatever,
Yeah.
the fucking cooking.
Okay. And I mean, catering business, that'd be dangerous. that'd be
It's always
scared.
always nice to eat.
The cookie was,
That's a really good one for it, actually.
You guys don't know how fucking close that is to the truth.
Yeah.
Well, I start in the office at work, they've got this commercial box of Tim Tams or individual
Oh,
wrapped
what a-
Tim Tams. And I can have none most days, but if I have one, I'll have 6.
There's a real kicker of a hormone called ghrelin. If you think about the way you remember it is like grr, like as in hunger. So ghrelin and leptin, there's these two hormones that are on a balancing beam. And basically one's like, oh, I'm cool. But usually you'll increase like, I'll put that one step back. Essentially, yeah, your calorie demand's here. So let's say you're like 105 or something, then are you now? Where do you sort of 108? Gotcha. And then training 4 to 5 days a week. Actually, this is so one of my favorite ones ever. If you just Google literally this. This will be the best. This is the best free one I've ever found. It takes like 3 different equations and does it for you. So just literally Google TDEE calculator. And it's the first one that comes up. It's literally TDEecalculator.net. This is my favorite one. It takes you. Right. Now in there, it'll ask, a little drop down, age, gender, activity level.
Yeah.
And then you just go through. And like, so if you hop on, anyone sort of found it?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So plug it through into an exercise. This is the other big thing this is more so with women than men typically, but also as we get older and testosterone drops, things get stubborn. And then I start seeing people tend to drop calories heaps. So yes, start plugging that through and start throwing some numbers at me. So have you?
I can't remember what my body fat was.
Leave it as optional because otherwise you can skew it a bit. So just go to moderate exercise 3 to 5. Yeah, that's cool.
What about body fat then? What do you do?
Well, let's just leave it as blank for now because it can be that can skew it. So your maintenance at 3,086. We use say 3K. Yep. How did you go, mate? What was your sort of maintenance at that? I know, okay. We're just bang on what Mike said. 3,000 is like spot on maintenance.
2.9.
2.9. Yep, cool. That's about what I expect. How'd you go? 2.6. 2.6 for you? Yep.
didn't realise you were so huge, man.
Is that what it means?
Heaps of muscle mass.
Make everything accountable.
Look at that.
I feel like yeah, mate. It's fun.
It's hard.
And you were 2.6 weight as well. Yeah, cool. And mate, what did you end up with? I didn't do it. If you did it, that's fine. It's better. Sometimes ignorance is better. And you know,
I'll be about 3,000.
yeah.
Yeah, 2.8, 3.
Yeah, okay, yeah. You'd have been more
Probably, yeah.
Well, 180.
So I put on my so that.
You might be. I'm 186, but I'm wearing boots. So like, yeah, you'd be.
I used to think I was 193. I kept putting it on everything else.
It's more than me.
Stand up.
I got told.
Yeah, you're like you're fucking 190, mate.
You've both been north of 6. You'd be like, yeah, both be 6'3". So, point being, what they found, this is the interesting one. One of the best ways for eliminating stress and also losing weight like sustainably and going forward. You don't want to go, so 10% is roughly where you want to go. Maximum 20% below that number. Max over 20%. Most of the negative adaptations happen like literally twice as fast. So what you'll see in this example, let's pick out yours randomly. Let's say there's 2.9, actually 3 is a nice easy number. So 3, yeah, let's just not do that. Yeah, cool. So that's 600 cal into 20%, 300 cal 10%, right? So you want to go between 2,400 to 2,700 cal, somewhere in that sweet spot. But this is your bare bones. Like that's like you in a really shit spot. That's you in a place where your body's like starving, hating life. More than 20%, you start getting like
For long term.
more than about 6 weeks really. But so if you're doing a constructive diet phase, what we typically do is we'll start at the 10% mark and walk them back. So we'll go like, let's say is in this sort of range. I mean, it's handy because everyone's literally in the exact same ballpark. It's really simple. We'll just use 3 as like a ballpark. So you might start at 2,700 as your 10% deficit, and then over a number of weeks, walk down as weight stops, and then you walk down to a ceiling at 24, and then you sit at 2,400, and then I suppose the idea is you can, like, by all means, you can increase activity a little bit. So that's where like the whole step tracking things come into it lately. So you might make sure, but essentially, if you like somewhere in this range, should, provided we manage stresses, manage everything else, and we keep our like hormones looking good, we should continue to see weight loss, right? And then what we do essentially is we get to the goal should be, like, a perfect dieting scenario, never happens, is you'd walk your way down from 10% to a 20% at most, get to your goal, reverse diet slowly back up, and then get back to a place where you're maintenance and just sit there and like enjoy life. Imagine if you've got 3,000 cows, man, just year round. That's what you should be. That's what you'll be at when you're like, you diet down to 100. That's your goal, and you'll go, cool. All right, well, maybe you've had to go down to 2,400, or hell, maybe you've had to go through hell and you've had to go down to like 23, 22, like really dig in. And that might be over like 12 weeks or 16 weeks. So rough ballpark, half a kilo a week is like a healthy place. Either like that's where the max you want to go, either growing or cutting. So if you're trying to build muscle, you're more than half a kilo a week, it's largely fat because you just can't build muscle unless you're on PEDs, but really you can't build muscle naturally much faster without getting a heap of fat. Then losing weight, half a kilo a week is a good place to be. So you might want to go 8 kilos, right? 16 weeks at half a kilo a week. And that's about a 500 calorie deficit. So I'd put you at, yours was 3 on the dot. So you're 2,500. I'd put you, say 2,500, and you should lose, that's enough for about half a kilo a week. And you do that for 16 weeks, you lose 8 kilos. And then once you're there, you just walk yourself back up slowly till you hit 3,000 calories and you maintain your weight. Job done. And then you sit there. But most people start having issues with holding fat, particularly it gets more and more stubborn because your body gets more and more stressed and it starts making it hold more and more and more and more fluid and more fat, and stress lowers metabolism too. So then it starts holding and holding and holding and holding. So yeah, it's actually usually increased. Man, you're spinning out. If you're at 17, it's for a short-term guy. You guys doing like a plan at the moment. So you might be like in short-term phase where you're trying to like, it's like weight training, but you like deliberately overtrain for a period to get a really good adaptation. But you'll be surprised, as you walk calories up, once you're doing whatever you're doing with Michael, you'll find you actually start losing weight as you increase calories, which feels weird, but you will. Like most females that I'll get, they'll be doing like yo-yo diets their whole life. You might meet a girl in their 30s and they've probably been dieting for like the last 10 years on and off. Because, most of their 20s, they're probably trying to stay pretty lean. So they're probably dieting through periods for most of their 20s. So you might catch them, they'll be at 1,200 calories training twice a day. And they're like properly in the hole. And you start feeding them more and they drop weight, eat more, drop weight, eat more, drop weight, eat more, drop weight. And I bet some are on double calorie intake and they're just dropping fat regularly because they're finally, the metabolism's going, well, food's here, metabolism comes right down to meet it. So when you start increasing food, metabolism goes, oh, cool. Starts walking up with it. And then it makes it, so it's, but cool plan. Like in the short term, when you build it with, like, if you're body scan, your macros, it makes sense. Like you do a fat, but more so like when you're in normal life, that's typically a ballpark. But 20% more than that, you guys will start having like big stress issues. Like recovery goes to shit, libido just dies. Like you'll notice libido just tanks. Like there's no such thing as a healthy libido in a massive calorie deficit, like just dies. And unfortunately, so with like most stress hormones cook libido too. Like erectile dysfunction and libido and all that jazz is very tightly tied up with the stress piece. Usually the stress part kills it. But the calorie deficit is a big way to get stress back. Like even if you're like in a phase where you're like, hey, I'm getting buried, like I'm getting cooked at work, so I'm trying to rebuild it, my stress tolerance. So I put calories at the maintenance. I was in deficit. I was like, oh yeah, I'm getting a bit fluffy, so I'll go to maintenance. And I just sat myself at maintenance calories and back training up 4 days a week in an attempt to sort of go, oh, well, I need to give my body what it needs in this phase. I can't bury it in volume and then bury it in training and then not give it enough food. So I try and, increase food to maintenance, put weights down from 5 days a week to 4. And then once work backs off a bit, then I can go back to 5 days a week training, go to a deficit or bulk or whatever. But yeah, they're about your realms. In numbers.
How would you recommend track it?
Yeah, well, what have you found? You've worked with 1 million people. What have you had good success with?
Millions is a bit of an exaggeration.
I can love it. Yeah, man.
I used to, I guess, what's it called? Chronometer. I found Chronometer works pretty good. It sort of sets everything up in calories versus like kilojoules and stuff. I don't know if you can change it in MyFitnessPal. I don't know. I found MyFitnessPal is just a bit too advertising. And
You got to pay.
yeah,
You pay for it. It's great because you can scan your food as well. And
Yeah.
it's pretty on point. So
How close to it when it scans it? I always wonder that. Like, it literally has a thing.
I think
Take a photo of it. And
yeah, I think Chronometer does the same thing. Monty had a different one that he sort of said was good. I don't know. We just obviously we've just used that one in the past, and I mean it's pretty. I think for me, it's a really interesting piece. Like once you get the basics, like we just try and kind of encourage people to get the basics and understand like the value of food. Like I don't think like long-term tracking is for me, it's an unhealthy burden on my life. I think it probably is for a lot of people. But once you
I beat myself up yesterday and I just went back to what I had. I had plenty of shit, but I had 2,100 calories.
And that was a bad day.
I didn't sleep well last night, so I was beating myself up. Fucking damn fun. Useless, demotivated, no willpower.
That's self-talk.
It does though, man, because it's such a mindfuck food. There's so much, and like we assume that only like women assume that they're the only ones that have any sort of negative food relationship. Like you said, is so pertinent, man. Like tracking forever is also a mindfuck in itself because it does that, right? You're like, 300 over, I'm a shit person, right? But like, I guess, and that's got its own little self-talk piece. But in terms of like food thing, that it's a useful tool to get where you want to go. So if you're trying to just maintain, like once you get to maintenance, at 3,000 calories, you can intuitively eat your ass off and you'll be fine. 3,000 is a fair bit of food. Like foot-long subs is about 1,100 calories. A whole barbecue chicken is about 1,250. Like you can't accidentally eat 3,000, right? Like even Cookie Monster, like even with like commercial scale food availability, it's pretty tricky, right? So like you can't really like tank those macros too badly. So you'll get to a place where you'll just be able to intuitively eat your way around, and you might even have to check in for a week, once a month, and just be, am I eating enough? Because most people undereat, man. More so women, I see that than men. Like we're pretty good that we have an appetite, but like honestly, especially after a long time of trying to get to a certain goal, it's been a few years of dieting. You actually get to a point where you get used to eating smaller and smaller portions. You get used to that like dialogue around it. So it's actually more important to try and walk the food up and then make sure you're eating enough for a period, right? And
It's the opposite in the opposite environment, basically, with starting. They're clearly not exercising at all. Eating things. Well, their lunch was huge, and they're snacking, and
I find it really interesting. Like, and it's probably something for me, but the stress around like some people can let that go quite easily. How much have you found, almost like regardless of whether you're whether Matt's eating 1,500 calories or whether he's eating 3,000 calories or 2.5 or whatever, like the stress and the blockers and the role that stress and sleep and all these things play, doesn't matter what you fucking eat, because your stress and all the other stuff around life and just won't let you just. Is that what you've found?
There's always periods where you have to surrender to the fact that you're not going to be able to be optimal in this environment. Like that was me this time. And I was in a really good place, dieting really well, getting consistent results. And I went, if I keep this up, my stress at work gets heaps shitter. I start getting hyperreactive when staff ring me with problems instead of like actually, being reasonable and calm and level-headed. If I'm single now, but when I had a partner as well, I was like just being, again, reactive, just a very different. I didn't want to show it that way, right? So I was like, well, so in this period of time where I can't afford to either show it that way, it gets costly. I'm like, okay, well, I have to go through a phase where you go, well, I'm probably not going to get any positive adaptation to exercise, or I'm not going to build muscle because you're quite catabolic when you're stressed. I was in a deficit anyway, but that's fine. So like, well, I have to increase food to make sure that I can deal with the stress at that time, because I'm probably not going to lose weight under stress because your body just goes, nah. Because think about what fat is. Fat is your body's energy store as you survive. So evolutionarily, if we were to get injured or break a leg or starve to death, it's like our best friend is fat. So it's going, if I'm in survival mode, the only way I can guarantee survival is high calorie availability long term. So fat. So it's actually a really smart adaptation system. It's just in modern society we put so much around physicals, right? But yes, there are periods of time where it's like there is the deck stacked against you a bit, and it's just about recognizing that and going, am I, so and supporting whatever you're trying to do in work as well and personal life and whatever with that food goal. So like you might go, okay, we want to get you down to a certain goal, but you might go, well, how's work, how's stress, how's family, how's everything? And it can even be strategic things like having a break from dieting too. So it might even be like if you've been dieting for like 6 months or something, or 3 months, or doing like 12, 18 weeks of dieting, you might go, well, actually, I'm going to take a 1 to 2 week break and just sit at 3,000 for like 2-3 weeks. And you watch, your body will just thrive, man. Energy will go. Libido within about 3 days will come back. Like sleep will just improve overnight. Like everything will start improving massively because like you're actually giving your body the resources for a while. Helps go, oh, cool, food's up, metabolism's up. And then it sort of gives you a bit of a reset because otherwise you just bear it down, and it stays there. But you just get stubborn and stuck.
So you're essentially trying to build yourself into just a beast, bit of a beast, like in terms of like feeling and hunger and lots of stuff. Like I know with myself, like even like right at the moment, like sleep hasn't been there, and it just gets that like what you spoke about before, like you get that cycle. It's like not sleeping enough because I've got to people work, and then you're not performing, and then you're not productive, and then you're more stressed, and then it's just that cycle. And then you don't eat well, or you don't eat enough, so you're not eating enough, right? I'm too busy for lunch, so it's either that or then you overeat. So I think it goes either way. You very rarely do you nail your nutrition when you're
very rarely
stressed and sleeping. You either go one way or the other. So for me, I tend to like undereat.
Yes, I'm an undereater.
Yeah.
Who gains hand up? So when you're stressed, who gains fat? Hands. Yeah, I'm that. That's that. Who loses weight when they're stressed? You. Yeah, I would pick that for you. Do you lose weight when you're stressed? You're more of an ectomorph, right?
I'm an ectomorph, so
you'd probably strip off muscle when you get stressed.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I feel weak. Yeah, that's the big one for me. I feel weak, and power goes, and muscle mass for sure.
Yeah, muscle mass is the tricky part for you guys. So you two are like you're an ectomorph too. I'd say just off bone structure and whatever. Yeah. So like, and you guys are more the opposite. Stress usually. The reason you guys got a fast metabolism in the two ends of the spectrum. Endomorph is like my body type. We build muscle easy, we hold fat easy. And usually build strength really easy, all that sort of stuff. The ectomorph is usually naturally very lean, naturally doesn't store much body fat, but also finds it hard to gain weight. So the ectomorph is the friend who can eat KFC every day and lose weight type thing, like the real stiff greyhound build, right? That's the ectomorph. And then the endomorph is the opposite. Looks at food, puts on weight, but give them a barbell, they're freaks. Think of like Maoris, Islanders, like that's the super endomorph body type. That's like a perfect, like the big Samoan body type, just big, thick, strong, those guys, but they also hold body fat a lot, right? And so you choose your food based on your body type. That's why I'm saying normally the endomorph gains fat when they're stressed, and then usually the ecto loses muscle and loses fat, loses weight. So a good friend of mine, she had a really high stress job recently, like a really toxic job, and she lost like 7 kilos, and she was only like a 52 kilo girl. So she went into like the 40s, like her face was starting to get sunken, like properly like strips it down because in flight or fight, your body's looking for fuel. So it's going to give me fuel. I've got to punch and run all the time. So it burns everything, right? But in the ectomorph, in us, it slows us down a bit, makes us hold on to stuff. So your body responds a bit different to stress too. Everyone's a bit different.
I don't know whether it's because I've gone so low with food, but I'm actually sleeping really well. I'm fucking exhausted.
Oh, copy.
At the end of the day,
yeah.
I'm fucking ready for bed at 7 o'clock. We go to bed yet?
Yeah.
And straight to sleep.
Yeah. I didn't apply the day.
No fucking desire for sex.
No.
Straight to sleep. Wake up a couple of times, and wake up tired.
It's very, very, very. Oh, I wonder if I go in the car. I love this because it's not a commercial thing, which is really nice. Normally, I would say here's a heap of stuff, and go try it and use it and everything. I love that this isn't commercial, which is great. But I got in the car. I'll just give you some stuff for later, and you can use it. But the reason you wake up several times throughout the night is that thing, because you're not getting deep enough sleep. And I hear this all the time, right? When I talk about sleep, because it's such a subjective thing, I sleep fine. Or for me, it's a relative thing. It's like for me, it's fine. Yeah. But you go, I fall asleep quickly. I pass out straight away. I might not be tired, but wired. Yeah, but you're fucking so exhausted and burnt out that you just collapse. But then you do wake up 2-3 times a night. Then you do wake up and you have to drag ass in the morning a fair bit, or it takes a while to get cognitively there. So it's spectrums. Sleep is the trickiest one. Man, I had shift workers. I grew up. I did 5 years in mining after 7 years in hospo, and I found I was surrounded by shift workers in that whole decadal career change, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, I sleep fine." And you're like, "Oh, well, it's fine for you then. How many hours a night? 4 to 5. Oh, cool. Okay. How's that go for you? And you get up throughout the night. Oh, just once or twice, man. Yeah, nothing crazy. Oh, yeah, okay. Yes, okay. So and when you wake up, how you feel, man? Oh, I've got to smash a few coffees, but it should be right. And you go, oh, okay, great. So your sleep's actually trash, yeah. But we've got wearables now, which is sick. So we can look at getting insight into it. So like that'll give you, that Garmin will give you some data. And if you look at your REM sleep, it's meant to be 25. REM is 20 to 25% deep. 15 to 25. That depends a bit on light exposure. And then light is the rest. And wake events should be ideally none. Like ideally none. 0 is the real goal for it. So that's about where you want to sit. So let's break apart an 8 hour night. So 8 hour is usually 1 hour 45 to 2 hours REM. And usually like 1.5 to 1.75 hour deep. And usually it's like, the rest, 4-ish light. That's like a pretty good sleep. That's what sleep looks like when it's good. About those sort of metrics. So 20, 25, but also if everyone's like, oh, sleep harder though, like, if you can only sleep 6 hours a night for whatever reasons you go on, as long as you're trying to get these metrics, you're trying to get more around like the REM, the percentages of what's more relevant. So I only got 6 hours in the other night, which is rare for me, but I got like a phenomenal, I still got 2 hours REM out of that 6 hours sleep. So it's like the quality was on, that was the amount of REM I'd normally get from an 8 hour sleep. So I actually was okay. Like this thing, my body battery was got up to where it normally would off a big sleep. So you can, if you have cracker sleep, you can beat time a little bit.
Yeah.
But but the impact of that is, so like they did a 2011 study on like what sleep did. They got a group that slept 6 hours, a group to 8 hours, and they put on the same calories and same macros, which is rare in studies because it's always like they just study people who are dying of got cancer or obese because there's no money in healthy people, right? So they studied 6 and 8 hours. This group here that slept the 8 hours, they lost 55% more fat than that group, 6 hour group. Only 2 hours sleep, and they lost 55% more fat in a 4-week trial. Only 4 weeks, 1 month, that's it. Same calories, same macros as well. 2 hours, only 2. So just going 6 to 8 bumps you up 50. Now that was fat, but what if you want to get jacked up? So it was also plus 60% more muscle as well. 60% more.
I think that's kind of what I alluded to, like, becoming a beast, like when you're sort of well rested, you're ready to be a beast. Whereas when you're not well rested, you're not ready to do anything.
Yeah.
Like I was just looking at my sleep, like, so Sunday night, I was in bed for 5 hours and 50 minutes. And my hours of sleep was 5 hours, 11 minutes because I had 31 awake, which is like, it's pretty, like, I don't know, like Whoop, I think Whoop tracks differently to like Garmin, like they're all a bit different. So it puts it in like a good range, like at 1.6 wake events per hour. Like I didn't get up, but like I think they track awake. I don't know how they track awake events, but they do restoration stuff. But then the next night, like, which I accidentally slept in, 8 hours and 8.5 hours of sleep.
You'll normally see that compensation mechanism too. You get like you might have like 2 or 3 shit sleeps, and then one will be over the top. And you'll see like you get the end of the week, you have like a 10-hour sleep out of nowhere, or you're gonna be just like black out and you have a monster one. You'll normally have a compensation effect. So if you have 2 or 3, you get a sleep debt. So you get like 2 of like, I think last time one was trash too. Like I'm like supplementing the shit out of it, but even then I had a pretty trashy one. Motels are never good, and I had a lot of light exposure and worked very late. But an example of that would be, okay, so there was sleep there. So mine was 7.5. This is what I consider a really shit sleep. So wake event there, like so that line was genuinely getting up, going to the bathroom. Wake event there, that was more so just bumping out a bit. That was 1.5 hours of REM, 1.5 hours of deep sort of thing.
Do you classify that as shit, do you?
That was pretty average.
Mate, I'd be stoked with that.
Yeah. He doesn't have kids.
Yeah. It's every time my little fella comes in, he comes in nearly every single night, and then my daughter, like, it's just, musical beds. It's always, you can see where I'm awake, then see where I'm awake. So if I'm getting,
Right as you're about to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Just the time to fuck him before REM.
And then bang, it's just broken, and the rest of the night's just like I don't go back into that day.
We meant to get this nice light, deep REM relationship right now. Last time why I say it's crappy is just the cycles didn't work either.
Okay.
So this just went light, exhausted REM. So I was just like, and so there was no like this one. He started to get it here, light, bit of deep, then REM. But overall, there was no cycles to it because it's meant to go light sleep takes you to deep, takes you to REM. Light to deep to REM. You're meant to go through these cycles, and it even does amazing things like cleans your brain, like hectic shit, spinal fluid, like heaps of stuff. But it's meant to be like in waves. So when you have like another one of like another architecture of a stressful day, will show up in usually like not consistent like And I think everyone does it different, like your Whoops versus your Garmin's versus your Apple Watches. Apple Watches are more like a little line up and down that'll show you, whereas Garmin's do it more like blocks like that, you know. So it's everyone's got a different device, but essentially you're looking for like wake events. So for me, 11 minutes awake is less than ideal, but essentially you just want to sleep through it is the best case scenario versus like a what was a good one?
I haven't been tracking mine, so I will chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just the thing,
Serious like
You take your Garmin off.
I was wearing both, bro.
I'll just,
I bought it up.
I will not get that. I will not get that out.
Like,
I wear them both, I don't have to stress about it while I'm.
my Whoop runs out of battery so often. It only lasts like 2.5 days, and I forget to charge it all the time. So
You will
like
not
I
drive
don't have sleep data from like Wednesday or last night, like Tuesday or Wednesday, but I've got it from like Monday, like Sunday, Monday.
Okay. My Garmin only lasts about a day, maybe.
Really? Yeah, right. Is that
Cheap, shitty, yeah, old.
Oh, well, this one, like, here's one that's like not a so that was a shorter one for me as well, like 6 hours 47. But hour 53 REM, hour 55 deep. It's like a shit ton of REM and deep. Like that's like more like 30% REM almost. So you can still also like biohack it a bit, where if you only have a short window, if you know how to like, yeah, you can get it good. So like if you look at it, literally was like a third of it was REM and stuff. So then you see, even though that was only 7 hours, like or 6 hours 40. That one was actually quite restorative on the body battery and stuff. So like you can actually, as long as the percentages are good, as long as the REM and the deep are there, you can get, and not many wake events ideally. You just don't, the wake events what sort of cook you a bit. But yeah.
So comparing my Garmin to my Whoop, so it's the REM was similar. Like
it's good, dude.
the Garmin said I was awake for 2 minutes.
No, that's actually a lot.
Whereas the Whoop told me I was awake for 30 minutes.
Oh,
So
that's pretty good, man. Have like 2
Yeah.
hours REM out of 5 hours sleep. Right? You must have been exhausted.
and the deep was like an hour and 10 versus an hour 55 minutes in the Garmin. So
Not bad metrics, man.
5 hours. Yeah, the total time, the total hours of sleep was similar.
You would have had some light exposure here because low deep sleep is usually indicative of light exposure. It's melatonin.
Yeah.
If you have like, it's like anyone supplemented with melatonin before, you'll see deep sleep just go like straight up. You'll usually see like deep sleep go higher. So if your deep sleep is low on there, you'll usually see that you've had too much light exposure, whether it's artificial lights, TVs, screens, whatever. Usually deep tanks when your light exposure's up. So
Melatonin would help me that first period of sleep, maybe the first 3-4 hours, awesome, and then I'd up.
yeah, it sort of bumps you out, which is weird.
It helps you get to sleep.
Yeah.
Long-term sleep.
And it does have a bit of a hangover effect to it as well.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, like it's useful at times, and it's a very potent antioxidant in the body. Melatonin is super important for a heap of things, but yeah, it's sort of like use it sparingly, so to speak. Like use it to either reset a body clock. If you're like shift workers, it's great to reset circadian rhythms. Use it if you've got a lot of inflammation, a lot of stress going on as well. But usually use it alongside adrenal stuff to lower stress, more so than like as a standalone. Because I have heaps of people who have like, I had like an insomniac, she was in the UK, and she was really struggling with sleep. And like they're trying like sleeping pills, they're trying melatonin by itself, wasn't really working because the second pathway, one is melatonin, one is light exposure, but the second one's stress. So if you don't deal with both, you might get really good short term because you switch the melatonin comes out and gets you down, but then the stress comes in and bumps you out at 1 a.m. So you sort of got to tackle both parts, and you can do it with a bit of lifestyle stuff. And then usually that you know, in a more commercial setting, they go, oh, subs help too, but there's other way. You got to look at both parts of the coin with it. So dim your lights, and then I do look at the supplement side of things with like the adrenal part.
I bought a pair of those blue light blocking glasses.
Yeah.
They're like $12, and I chuck them on about 5 o'clock in the other. The kids get a giggle, and they seem to do all right. Like from about 5 o'clock, and then I've even scrolled. They're on Amazon. I think they're $12. They would all.
No, that's cool.
Well, I think they're right.
Yeah, apparently they seem to be pretty good and they're cheap. Like they're not expensive sort of hack. Yeah, no, from what I see, because it's just about limiting the amount of light that hits your pineal glands, right? It's just, trying to filter out certain spectrums of light at certain times of night.
So don't turn your laptop up super bright because you can't see it properly at 10 p.m.
Every time.
Turn the brightness up.
Find yourself squinting, your heart's a bit bright.
Or you look away and you're like, oh, geez, I can't see anything.
Oh man,
It's so dark.
my hotels are so bad. One last night I had a 70-inch flat screen on the wall. It was like a $99 motel, and it had a flat screen the size of my fucking house. It was like that, and it was on with a screen on it. And I had to walk in and just and like, oh great, awesome, and fair enough, low deep, but yeah, lights, but best you can. Like, and even like innocuous stuff you don't think about, man. Like turn off like if you got any like. Just have stuff outside your room best you can. Like best thing I ever did, just put my phone charger out in the lounge room instead of in my room. Because I used to then you just scroll till you fall asleep, then just put it on charge. If it's out in the lounge room, you have to you do it, then you walk away and you put it down. Like it's not with you.
Couple of things I've tried to do. So we've got one of those plug-in lights that just sort of comes on when it's dark.
Yeah.
So just navigating around the house or the kids or whatever, so you don't have to turn the lights on at night.
Yeah, that's
And,
cool.
so we just have one in the bathroom, and so I shower with just that light on.
Yeah,
Because I
nice.
always shower before bed. And so I shower just with like no lights on besides that lightness, and I think it definitely helps me wind down. If I do a little bit of breath work, just have a shower, and just keep trying to get the light low. It just helps me just sort of just like flip the switch a little bit to just decompress and get rid of that light. Like even if I've been sitting on the computer, I'll start getting real wired. And then I just know that if I hit when I want to that shower, it's like my body just knows it's go time to.
Definitely helps. There's a big correlation with like body temperature and sleep readiness. So the idea of the shower is you have a really hot shower.
Yeah.
And it spikes your body temp, so your body overcorrects. Just like the other day, it'll overcorrect and heat you up when it's cold. It'll cool you down when you're hot. And your body has to lower in body temperature as it goes through different stages of sleep. Your body temperature goes lower, lower, lower. So like at your deepest sleep, you should be your lowest body temp, lowest heart rate, all that stuff. So you have a shower, it artificially spikes your heat, then your body overcompensates and cools you faster, which then starts putting you into that sleep cascade, which is quite good. Same as like I sleep with a fan all the time, like a fan or aircon or whatever you can to cool you down. Keep cool and you'll find you sleep heaps better. Like when it's like a hot stuffy night in summer and you're just like, your sleep goes to shit. Well, it's because your body temperature is meant to be low when you're sleeping. So hot shower's good.
I'll shower before bed for a while and I just stuff me out.
It wakes you up. Yeah, it wakes you up, 100%.
You go to bed, it'll be cooking.
Yeah, exactly right. Because it did that. It spoke in the morning, which is when you increase body temp, increase energy, increase adrenaline. Good in the morning, but put a cold shower in the morning, you'll spike it really well. And then, at night, have the hot shower, drops it.
But I've also found I can't have it too hot. So if I have it too hot, then I'll go to bed and I'll be like sweating and it's just, and it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I just had to find it. I don't know, I'll have to try it, like, because I played around with cold showers during the last 6 weeks and that just before bed. And I reckon if you can get comfortable with it, like because you're going cold showers, like you're cold shower.
Part of my life.
Wow.
Yeah. So I almost think like similar to the breath work and stuff. I don't know what the studies show, but I know Tim Ferriss did a whole heap around the hot and cold therapy before and after whatever sleep. But
Shower at night.
Probably an hour or two before bed, not an hour straight.
How's that go? Do you like pep up a bit? What is it?
I love it.
Really?
One in the morning, as soon as I get out of bed, jump straight in the shower, and then another one in the night. Couple hours before bed.
Yeah, right.
I love that.
How's it not? I guess how long have you been doing it for? I'm very interested with that.
Just before Christmas. Yeah, just before Christmas. And to the point, it's a bit bizarre. The cold is actually starting to feel warm. Don't know why.
Interesting. Your body's just gravy at the back.
No, well, it just cold tap on, get in. And feels like it's not as cold as what it used to be.
Yeah, 100%.
It's just that thing. It must be. My body must
It
be.
is. But it's remarkable too, because they found like it activates some very, very, very old sort of genes that used to get activated during severe stress events. So like cold exposure will activate things we call sirtuins, and sirtuins are like you'd only have them activated when you're having like if you're freezing to death or starving to death or dying, right? So that's why when fasting is good, like fasting activates these old architects that like kick on and they'll they can like increase metabolism or increase growth hormone, so like a lot of these positive things happen as a result of a stress on your body. It's just more so your ability to recover from the stress is the tricky part. Because like look, I had that the other day. I was already so stressed. When you have a massive increase, because that'll spike stress. Afterwards, then it heightened my stress response to other things. So you've also got to use it like at different. But in the morning, usually cold showers are great. But you also down-regulate your stress response to something you've had chronically too. So if you won't always get. Same as coffee. You have coffee once, boots like cortisol, boots adrenaline gets you like on. Then after a while, coffee just does coffee. Same with that. Like the first cold shower would be like really on, and then after that you'll sort of it generally adapts. But that's really interesting that you say that, because I would have thought at night time, even though you're used to it, I would still think it would like wake you up a bit. That's fucking interesting, eh?
I reckon if you can like breathe through it, like you just breathe and you can get your breath under control and stuff.
It's an expectation too, I think. I've just to feel a certain way when I get in. So it's not shocking me either way. It's not, it feels good in the morning, but at the one at night it's not neither hot or cold. It's just,
I must feel a little bit better if I have a 30-second cold, minute cold off the back of the hot shower.
Yeah, they say that.
I don't know, there's studies behind it, but yeah, it's almost just like feels a little bit cleaner, or I don't know, it just feels just fresh, like I feel
Fresh, yeah.
kind of fresh, ready to snuggle up. And I almost sort of thought the opposite, like, because I know the hot before bed and decrease and all that sort of stuff, but I also sort of thought like, all right, if you go cold and you're sort of a little bit cool as you get out of the shower, and if I jump straight into bed after that, then I'll want to rug up, and that'll like obviously like doonas and things like that.
Yeah.
The weight can help you sleep better. And just being, I just thought it would cool me down and feel cool versus my body trying to heat it up. Well, so I don't know either way. That's just how
good for you too, because it's like quite we did up like heat sensitive, like testicular sensitivity to heat is a real problem, because if we really heat up, it can actually decrease sperm production heaps. Like a sauna decreases sperm production acutely by like 40% for like a week. Like massive. So like to the point where I had a mate who's a naturopath then in Melbourne who
at a
actually
certain temperature.
At a certain temp, but even not even much, because it's used like a sauna is like an extreme example, but even like in general, just having like running hot throughout the day and stuff, that increase in temp can do it. Like my mate who's a naturopath in Melbourne, he actually like frozen peas like straight afterwards or during, or like really took it seriously. But he did like bloods before and after, and would do it regularly, so like once or twice a day. He'd put an ice pack on basically, or there's like cold drink or something, to sit between his legs and just for like 10 minutes, right? And he actually saw like significant increases in like fertility and like nuts, like because heat also cooks it, like literally cooks them.
I think there's a Huberman podcast.
There is.
With Rhonda Patrick.
And with one last week with Andy Galpin, and he talked heaps about this
cool.
cold thing.
I have to listen to that one. Rhonda was talking about so some saunas, and depends on the temperature, but hot baths, having a hot bath is like the worst thing.
Yeah, thanks for
cooks them. Yeah, it
does.
Yeah, absolutely cooks them.
Yeah.
So get rid of your spas, gents. Don't sit in your spa for fucking 2 hours.
Unless that's your plan, because it literally inhibits fertility massively.
Yeah.
Like it was on par. It was something crazy. It was like after a sauna for like a 20-minute sauna exposure, it was nearly as effective as like having female birth control for men. Nuts, hey? Like it directly inhibited. Disclaimer. I don't want to have any unintended side effects there, but it was like on par with like having contraceptive. It was nuts.
Well, but I think it's also like
It's
the way I like to look at it as well is like, all right, what's the net gain or net loss, right? So it's like, all right, I'll go and have a shower for a sauna for 40 minutes. What does that do to my stress and my time for myself, like all these other benefits? I might cook my nuts for a little bit, which might have an effect. But maybe my net gain, I don't know, maybe my net gain in testosterone is more. That's just pure speculation.
No, it's
interesting to know, like, what are the other side effects of doing a positive thing? Because I think we can get caught in this rabbit hole of like, oh well, I think that's what we do, right? It's like, oh well, fucking blokes better not do sauna because we cook our balls, and now we can't eat tomatoes because they
soy milk or plastic.
So it's like, all right, well, if I'm drinking a liter of water,
is that better than having a small amount of plastic exposure?
And I buy a water bottle because that's all I can drink out of, and I get 3 liters in versus a liter in. Is that a net gain or a net loss if I'm getting the plastics and the stuff like that? So
dehydration versus 100%.
So like for me, there's always a conversation around like what's the net gain and
I always think the biggest heavy hitters that outweigh all negatives in your life. You can sleep well, you can become resilient. Because you just got to build yourself resilience up, because then you can adapt to everything. So as long as you can have like a mad sleep, you can get a really cracker sleep, you can bounce back from anything. You would, and then and then manage stress as best you can in terms of usually that's a supplement piece, but that's the big one, big sleep.
And then the addition to that is like, all right, if you're cooking your nuts in a sauna and you're not getting any sleep, which is what you said, 30% production, and you're massively stressed and you're doing this stuff, it's like you're compounding, right?
Yeah, it is. It stacks. It's all cumulative. So they're the big ones. Like sleep, stress, they're the big heavy hitters. And then recovery piece usually as well. Because overtraining, I didn't realize this week, actually, that podcast with Huberman was apparently overtraining blocks. If you have periods of time where you are really going hard, right? Let's say you do it like you're 5 days a week and you're stressed and you're under eating, whatever. They found like the norepinephrine and the adrenaline release was 200 to 300% higher than normal baseline when they overtrained athletes, and they only had to do it for 2 weeks. So they got these. It was nuts.
On the adrenaline to keep you in the.
To give them the boot, and their body freaks out about it too. So it was brutal. They put them through a 2-week training block, which was fucked up. It was 1 rep max squat every day for 2 weeks. So they wanted to overtrain these blokes deliberately to see what would happen and do their blood work. And 200 to 300% increase in stress hormones in only a 2-week overtraining phase, but doubled to tripled their stress hormones in a very acute way. So the training piece is also a big one. So if you guys are doing weights and you're doing it on most days of the week too, you can play around with your volume. That was like acute overtraining. Like you're not going to do 1 rep max back squats every day for 14 days, but just also take into account training alongside your lifestyle, eat enough food, and then prioritize sleep. They're the big pillars: sleep, nutrition, and stress.
With all those environmental factors that we can try to work back to doing the best we can. Is there any other way, and it might play into your supplements? How do we boost our testosterone? How do we? How do we? Because that's clearly the issue. Like we're going from 1970 to 2011 going down.
Pretty messed up, though.
So if we work all these factors back to try to do our best, is there a way to boost our?
That's CRT. Well, the Americans are big on that, right?
What are you? I'm interested in your thoughts on that. If you want to kind of answer that question,
well, that's an interesting question, eh? Like HRT, like
mate.
I'm asking for
Is that human growth?
That's part. Like Americans will do that a fair bit. So your growth hormone part is obviously cellular repair. Any aging, right? Is growth hormone.
Yeah.
Testosterone replacement therapy (TRT) is more so just that, right?
Hormone replacement.
HRT, more so than anything else, right? And they do it in the States heaps because they assume there's a bit of a trade-off. You get to a certain point, so if it declines at like 2% a year from the age of 25, by the time you hit like 40, it's 15 years, you're about 30% under where your optimal levels are. So then you extrapolate that 50 and you're near half your best, So there is an argument going, well, look, nature has laws, right? So at some point you will be suboptimal, you would think, in a linear sense. But I also think now we're fortunate enough, there are some natural herbs that do stimulate things like clinically very significantly. So I've had like 6 people do pathology for me, get bloods. And I've tracked it. It's been quite fascinating. And I've done elderly guys. Like I had a guy that was like 59, so I could track like the what we call andropause, so like the point where testosterone gets below where it's needed in men. And then I also had guys that are doing like post cycles after like steroid cycles and stuff, where they're technically fully shut down and cooked. I've had guys who have done it more in the middle. Where like I had a guy who's PT actually. He was only 26, right? And the range is like, but the range is 8 to 31, so big, 8 to 30, right? Big range. He was at 9. And he was 26. Wow. Bad, probably bad. Like if you're in your 20s, you should be like 25 to 30 on the top end of that bracket, right? Stress cooked him. And this shows how acute it is, man. A guy in his early 20s who's a PT, tracking calories, low body fat, like heaps of muscle mass, like looked fantastic. But he went through a relationship breakup, was running a small business, just went through the ringer, right? And he got it cooked it, man. Like that was only in 8 weeks because he had his bloods done quite regularly because they were quite concerned. They did a follow up afterwards. And they're like, how is a guy in his early 20s? Like 9 would be honestly like, you'd be 65 or 70 before you hit 8 or 9. Yeah. This dude was in his 20s. So everyone goes, oh yeah, testosterone's only for like older guys. But no, fuck no. No, I got guys in their 20s who are cooked.
What is it? 9 what? 9% overall?
Oh no, so on 9
scale.
Yeah, not like 90 grams per millimole. So it's like you got free like total testosterone is a massive number. So it might go up to 1,000, but usually they'll set it like that 650 sort of thing was the average back in the day anyway. Yeah. So that's the big total, huge amount of total hormone in your body, but the active amount is only 2%. So the active is only that 8 to 30 out of that's in your bloodstream rolling around, building muscle, getting you jacked, doing all the cool stuff. So you've only got a tiny amount of your total hormone is active. And the tricky thing is stress binds it. The things bind up all that total, they bind it and stop being active. So you've only got a very small amount of free, actually active testosterone. And that's what they measure more so in that sort of 8 to 31 is the range. But the really annoying part with our Medicare system is they, instead of going, men are getting alarmingly low testosterone, they keep lowering the range.
Yeah, yeah.
That's normal.
It's normal range now because you're within this barn door of a range. If you're at 8 versus 30, you can be called normal on paper, but you're actually, the guy at 8 is suicidal, depressed, bipolar, hasn't had direction in 4 months. Like this guy here is in a bad place. This guy at 30 is superhuman. He's feeling fantastic. Lots of like great energy, great sex drive, great recovery, great muscle, body. But they're both normal. So like the range, also take it with a grain of salt.
So 19, that's shocking. And from my age, 35.
So you're at 19 now. Yeah. Oh, I would say shocking, man. Like I would like to put you in the mid 20s if I could.
That's all right. Yeah. Okay.
I could get you to mid 20s, but like that's where things start getting.
Because the GP said it to me. She's like, that's actually really good. I'm happy with that. And I was like, I don't know. Like you just said, I'm glad you said it about that sliding scale. It's like, okay, right. Well,
They bump the reference range down. They don't make everyone go, because otherwise they've got the problem of like, everyone's out of the range now. So like, move the range.
yeah.
It's depend on. It used to be bad, but now it's average.
Yeah.
Yes, bingo. That would have been like tragic before, right? Like, so it was, and only even back before I was competing, I competed both on cycle and off cycle.
And say, you're crap, mate.
It's
Like in the 70s, they're all looking around going, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, exactly, man. Because unfortunately, the guys from say in the 70s, right? Literally, the average testosterone of a 20-year-old man now is equivalent to a 65-year-old male's back in the 60s, I think it was. So like
Darts and silking scooters.
yeah, man.
Shit for footy games.
Yeah, having a great time, like my old man's 70 now, he's 69. So his testosterone would like following that linear of what it used to be, would be literally on par with a lot of guys in their late 20s. It's fucked, and he's old. He's like my old man's proper old, and like, so. And it's just because it's declining. But so the range, they move the range, and they fuck with you. So I think like 19 isn't bad. But even only when I did my last roundup, I did a few before I did a few cycles and stuff for competing. And I'm quite a good example because I did trained natty for Holt for the first 8 years, then did bloods. Then competed in untested feds on cycle for a few years. Now I've been natty for 2-3 years and intend to go on that way. So I've got before, during, and after. But I got mine to 32 as a natural before. But I was pretty lucky. Grew up on a farm, all on rainwater, ate heaps of meat. They look really good, right? Low stress. It was awesome. And then bounced back after all that. I got back into the mid 20s after a while, trying to be pretty careful with my sort of some pharmaceutical stuff. Got me in there. But genuinely, that guy that had it 59, I got him up to 26, and he's nearly 60. So you can 100%. The herbs we got now is quite good. I mean, they're very ancient herbs, but we finally have data on them, and we can understand how they work in the body. And now there's clinically significant research. The 6 guys I've had in different ranges have all had statistically very significant increases. Old mate, there was a 9. I got him to 15 within a month. And then when it got from 15, I pumped him up to 21. And then the guy that was, nearly 60, he started at 11 and we bumped him up over. His took a bit longer because he was obviously age was against him and he drank a lot. So we took alcohol smashes testosterone, by the way. Alcohol's the biggest smasher of testosterone. It tanks it and it boosts estrogen and smashes your gut. So alcohol, if you can avoid it, there's no benefit of alcohol that we know. There's just so.
Is that just a standard blood test?
So is the test that Jace getting from his GP? How does that compare to bloods from a bunch of the other private?
Should be standardised.
Standard?
Yep.
Just go to your GP now.
Yeah, I want my testosterone checked. And the weird thing is they treat us like fucking terrorists, man, is the annoying part. Because I suppose under Medicare, you'd be covered for all of it. So just ask your testosterone panel and while you're there, and you might get a regular check while you're at it. You might ask for bloods as well on vitamin D. That's important because vitamin D is quite crucial for testosterone production. Testosterone, just total test, free testosterone, vitamin D panel. If you finding it hard to drop body fat, you might want to get your thyroid panel done too. But they'll only test one hormone in your thyroid panel. They'll just test TSH, which is of limited use. But Yeah, but you take like it's a standardized test. You take like testosterone, whether you go through private or whether you go through Medicare, just like total test, free test. They'll do that for you.
It's pretty cheap though, to get it done privately. Like, I don't think it's very expensive.
Yeah, and like and luteinizing hormone, so LH and FSH, if you can, just really LH, FSH. Those are the two signaling hormones. They'll tell you how much signal is going from the testes to produce more. So that'll tell you how much of a priority your body has to produce more as well. So you might be at 19, right? But if you've got strong signaling, saying if your luteinizing hormone is high, that means your testes are saying boot, like increase. So that could be okay because it might show a trend where you might be lower because of where you are in time, i.e. stress with kids and sleep and stuff. But if the signaling's strong, then it might actually be able to return to baseline. But if it was like at 19, but you had low luteinizing hormone and there's no encouragement to produce more from your body, then you might find that's then you probably could look at trying to boot luteinizing hormone or whatever.
So best ways to answer your question, best ways to boost it. First one from that, like from my understanding, strength training. Lifting weights.
Strength is good. Fats as well, dietary fats. Really handy.
So good fats.
Yeah, and you want
strength training.
Yeah, strength training, dietary fats are really good. Make sure you get a decent amount of like fats in. And animal fat, love it. Get India. Butter, animal fat, saturated fat, really good for test. Yeah, I know that everyone like bashes it, but it's really good for you. So like butter and animal fat, excellent. Like fatty cuts of meat, sick. Really good.
Boost testosterone.
Because you build hormone. Testosterone is built from fat. Cholesterol. Hormones are built from cholesterol. So like you need dietary fat to make cholesterol to make hormone. So in the absence of fats, you can't build it. So it's not just like fat's good for it, fat is it. So it's a really crucial part of the whole puzzle, man. It's really vital. And so luteinizing hormone, LH and FSH, they're just two other sort of signaling hormones that go alongside it. So they're more signalers so you do your total test, your free test, and then you'll get your LH, FSH. You'll ask for that too.
What if you've got high cholesterol?
Interesting. Then you've probably got low testosterone then, because everything comes from cholesterol. So cholesterol is your parent, right? It's your fatty acid. It's the top of the food chain. Then cholesterol gets put down to basically a parent hormone where every hormone is made from it. Sex hormones, thyroid hormones, adrenal hormones, stress hormones, everything comes from one place. So then your body, it basically comes down to a question of, the tricky part is if you're not producing a heap of testosterone, it can backlog it. So it goes, well, it doesn't need a huge amount to build testosterone because of low testosterone. So it backlogs. Because it goes, well, I don't need to strip a heap of this out and start building test, right? What usually happens is it starts pulling it. If you're very stressed, usually it prioritizes stress and starts throwing it down that way, which also stops it having resource to build. It's all from one place, right? So the high cholesterol can be that. It could also be insulin resistance to a degree, but stress causes that too anyway. So I would say probably low. If you increase testosterone, you'll probably decrease cholesterol as a total number because you'll just produce more. You'll strip more of it through to build stuff with it. It's a resource more so than a problem. So I'd say yours be a bit. And what's your age? How are you, mate? 55. So that about tracks. So 100%. It'd be and it makes sense with the dieting part. And also if you're people think like high fats and cholesterol or like increases cholesterol. It's not. It's actually like weird enough. Usually it's a carb problem, but in your case though, yours would just be high stress, big calorie deficit, poor sleep, smashing testosterone down. And look, also there's the linear, there's the time piece, which would be lowering test, meaning you're not pulling as much cholesterol through, so you have more of a pool sitting there. So basically it's just like give your body a reason to boot test, and then it'll strip more through and sort of equilibrate cholesterol. Yeah.
And insulin resistivity. What is that? Resting blood glucose?
Yeah, like fasting blood sugar. Yeah, fasting blood glucose is really good too. So FBGL, like fasting blood glucose, if you're asking for that, really standard one. They test for it all the time because everyone's diabetic now. So they'll test that heaps too. And it's like you want that to sit at like 4 to 6, somewhere in that realm is good upon when you wake up.
Is that this? I can't remember. Is there an insulin resistivity test as well?
Not specifically. They just test the markers around
just
it.
the blood glucose.
They'll test fasting blood glucose after food as well. So blood sugar's going, but you're not like 19's pretty decent, man. Like especially
like you're saying for a while you're not getting the
It's funny you say about cholesterol because every time I go get bloods done, it's like your cholesterol. You got to watch your cholesterol. Watch your cholesterol.
Are you on TRT now then, or are you not? No, you're not.
So I don't know. It's just something that like I thought would be like a remedy for like the feeling, but stress. What you're saying, like
so strength training, dietary fats,
Yeah.
And then there's some natural herbs.
Yeah. Tonkat Ali's great.
Yeah.
Tonkat's
What
sick.
about testosterone?
Not so much a hormonal modulator as much as people think. So like
Yeah.
the main ones that work really well, ashwaganda's beautiful. Love that herb.
Yeah.
Ashwaganda's great.
Yeah.
It's a really good one. So and these are a trick to spell. So like ashwagandha.
How you spell it? ASHWAGANDHA.
Got that
Sounds
Tonga
African.
Ali and the other one, Tonga Ali, and there's another one that I've got. It was in the powder. form.
Oh yeah, Fedosia or something. Yep.
KATALI.
ALI. And you'd want that, say 200.
Yeah, and you want that in capsule form. You don't want it in powder form. Fucking hell.
Tastes better.
Oh, that's the biggest shit I've ever. That is chat. You cannot. I don't know how anyone can put that down. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, man. Because I deal with this shit every day. But yeah, like
Do you have it in powder form every day?
I got I've got this one. I'll show you the I'll show you that herb. I got some herbs in the car.
Just the smell of it.
Yeah,
alone.
but it's twice a day. Well,
Yeah, what's that?
Yeah.
Found a blood test I had. Where's the shit? This was ages ago.
You've got.
So I'll go to the top.
they might test it for all.
Yeah. It's probably not. I don't know if it's a standard. Is it a
It
standard
was
test?
just, this one was just one I got. It just said something.
Would they? Yeah, I think was testosterone be part of a standard blood panel? Yes.
Yeah.
Not. Yeah.
If you look at so if you look at this stuff here, it's a potent ass herb. So, and most of them are like when you
herbs are just so gross.
Yeah.
so if you have a sweet.
Which one's that one?
This one's like that one's large. Actually, that one's pretty good. That's mostly ashwagandha there, but they it's also got enough lemon balm in there to make it smell half decent. But
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not bad actually considering.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but it's so like these ones, like when I make stuff, like when I play with the DAP visions, that's typically what I play with. But the lemon balm makes that smell deceivingly good. It tastes like dirt. If you mix that in water and drink it, it's rubbish. But
Just stick your finger in it and lick it.
yeah, look, go for it. It's all
Give it a little taste cleanse.
yeah, have a crack at it. There you go. It's not bad. Like, honestly, it's weird. It's sort of like I get used to playing with herbs so much. Like I actually don't mind the taste. It's quite earthy, but it tastes. yeah.
Good way to say it tastes like dirt.
Yeah. Look, well, and mushrooms are really good too, like the reishi and lion's mane and stuff. Like there's some mushrooms that are very useful.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I get a kick out of these. So I love using like the old like Chinese and Indian herbs. Are really potent because they use them for a long time. They just don't have any data on them. So now we're researching how the herbs work. And it's really fascinating. Hey, like Tonkat Ali was shown to increase the free testosterone part by 37% in a 4-week trial. It's like, statistically very significant, right? Like very significant. And then like ashwagandha will lower cortisol by 32%. Like 32%. So if you can drop a hormone by a third acutely, it's pretty potent, right? Like it's like, whereas we used to, there was a bit of a period where like hormonal stuff was a bit snake oily in the industry because we didn't have many good botanicals to sort of choose from, and there wasn't much data out. Now there's a lot more research, and people like Huberman and stuff are making it heaps more popular. So people are reading about it and asking questions, and so studies are getting published and funded, and so now we're getting really good data, and we're like, oh, cool, this actually does stuff.
Do we know, say, what portion of the male population is, say, low in testosterone?
Almost all of them.
Or almost all of them?
Yeah. Large.
So all of us sitting here.
Maybe suboptimal.
I reckon I get some bloods done, but I reckon I'm for sure.
Well, the symptom picture is almost more relevant. If you don't want to have to go and get bloods and go through all the pathologies, because bloods are also just a snapshot in time as well. They're just like, what are you in this exact second?
Yeah.
Like if you did one after a sauna, for example, you'd be like, or do one after a heavy weight training session, for example, might look like your liver enzymes are really high. Might look like you're, like an alcoholic's liver. If you went and did a heavy weight session and got bloods the next day, they'll look at, they got elevated like blood markers, you got elevated kidneys, you get like kidney count and like liver count. So it's also like a snapshot, but the symptoms are the big ones, like mood, motivation, drive, libido, recovery, muscle mass, like all the classic ones. They're the symptomology is as relevant as the pathology, right? So yeah, what's the felt effects of low test? And libido is like, we're lucky. Women are less libido dependent, but men, testosterone and dopamine are very tightly linked to libido. So it's like sex drive is like a very potent, like really good indicator of where you're sitting. So yeah,
it's almost. I think it's almost immediate. The relationship between stress and libido. Like,
yes,
man. Like sleep and stress. Like, man, if I'm stressed, as soon as I'm relaxed, or have space and time,
Back on.
like back on.
Yeah, and then
Right.
a few weeks of crazy or a day of crazy.
Yeah, and there's like, oh yeah, like haven't slept well or stressed. Like it's like, yeah, I've got nothing.
Yeah. Very much
yeah,
so.
I reckon they're just the felt effects. Yeah, I don't think you need to be a rocket scientist to know if you've got low libido and all that sort of stuff that you're probably low in the stuff that makes you
Have a
libido.
Yeah.
Even environmentally, like we have to be low. Like
Oh,
I
man.
was saying, like we've got to be
Yeah.
there.
Well, like, man, the crazy part was the female, because we're lucky we're not using foundation and makeup and cosmetics and like, all that stuff, right? And fake tan, or like the average female that they had, this was a 2017 study, so it's been 6 more years of more environmental burden. But in 2017, they had the average 35-year-old female consumer, they had 14,000 of them, right? So a big fuck off study. They're exposed to 231 chemicals a day. And that system has to do with hormones as well, and has to do with everything you eat, everything you drink, everything you sweat out, everything you inhale, everything plus 231 chemicals a day their body has to deal
I'm
with.
just noticing at the moment with my teenage daughter, just, you know that they're going through a lot of hormone changes.
Yep.
But the fucking smells and shit coming out of her room and out of the bathroom when she's finished in there, it's just fucking
Crazy, man.
like, check. Stop it already.
Stop. Please stop.
Yeah. Oh,
What, you're killing yourself and you're killing me.
yeah.
It's like passive smoking over here.
It's like that's just like- fragrances are a fucker, actually. Yeah, fragrance stuff, heavily fragrance stuff, bugger it off. Like deodorants, colognes, anything with a heavy fragrance element usually increases. It usually is quite estrogenic. So anything heavily fragranced, like aftershaves, deodorants, apart from the physical, like underarm India system type thing, fragrances apparently had a big thing too. So yeah,
And obviously, particularly deodorants, like you're putting them into
Pores.
highly sensitive, highly absorbent sort of places near your lymph nodes, stuff like that. Like it's
on a sacrifice. I'm a
Good.
stinky man, so I should be wearing more deodorant and having more soap, but you just got to weigh up the pros and cons.
yeah. Do you use like a natural deodorant and stuff like that, or do you use no deodorant? Or
Oh, I did, but they're all roll-ons. It was just like
yeah, I hate it.
cakey and horrible. It was all
A
weird.
natural one at Woolies that will work.
Yeah. I haven't used deodorant. I haven't used deodorant for
Yeah, I can't remember what I used to today.
4 years.
And if you can,
I don't know if anyone's noticed. Do I smell like?
Brothers stopped using deodorant and shampoo and conditioner
Yeah,
15 years ago.
yeah,
Doesn't smell.
Yeah.
His hair looks fine.
yeah. I think your body just starts. I don't know what the
It does.
you probably go through a period of like, oh yeah, what's going on, and then it's just like, yeah. Then you just then you just smell like
But then it got its own oil soak.
Yes.
brute. You probably smell like brute, but like without putting the deodorant on. Is that right?
That is almost bad. That man must have brewed it. But look, Links Africa.
Links Africa and brute deodorant. The best male larking boys of all time. Apart from was it smoking ones and alcohol ones,
Yeah, it's a good one. But
gambling ones.
He'll do his own, but get rid of those.
Nothing good about them.
No. Oh, and free balling as well. Underwear is restrictive and again increases temperature. So if you can free ball more often, you can better. That's really actually makes a massive improvement. So yeah, like
How much improvement?
I've got to pull some data for you now. Okay. Most studies I have with me, but free ball is a hard one. There's not much clinical research on it. It was. But plastics was honestly a big one, man, because the whole the sperm one that was done on these things called phthalates, and phthalates were found in soft plastics. So ones you'd see around like Tupperware to an extent, like ones that are more malleable and stuff. And they found they were finding them in almost all adults, but then they also find they could get passed on to children. So during pregnancy, they found they actually got passed on to the infant. And they found it in newborns. They found like newborns already had something like 160 chemicals in their system that was identified from environmental stuff. It was like crazy. But the phthalates in particular, they were the ones that were shown to decrease even genital size in men and women, decrease production, fertility, decrease overall height, properly stunted development, genital development, fertility, properly. They reckon the plastics part, because it blew up in the 50s after World War II. Plastics became big, and then everything was in plastics, and it was the big grades. And then it's bleached into systems, and then it's caused this accelerated decline in everything. So
Yeah, it's in nature too.
What's
Ocean studies and everything. So they're pretty big impact.
interesting.
those molecules that you spoke about? if you've got bottles which are like BPA free,
Yep.
Does that reduce those molecules, or other molecules still there, or what's the take on the BPA stuff?
The rule is just you don't want it heated. You don't want to heat in it. So just don't microwave your plastics and you're pretty well okay. If you can keep it like at room temperature, it'll keep the molecules somewhat chill, right? They're pretty well fine. Just don't put it in an environment where it gets hot and it starts leaching and it starts messing with it. So as long as
I think so, if you're using plastic bottles, people keep them for like 5-10 years.
it starts breaking.
It takes the mold.
It's got a particular place with up. Yeah, it's a fair point. It does break down, but you're right. Yeah.
Grandfather's teeth were in it yesterday.
Microwaving food, right? It's probably not that good.
Yeah, it seems to kill a lot of nutrients. Weird enough. It seems to actually because a lot of your nutrients are water stable and it starts agitating the molecules, right, and actually starts denaturing certain micronutrients. So apparently it decreases the nutrient content in a lot of foods. But I try not to get too deep in the weeds on the environmental part, because then you get to a point where at some point you just have to live in a cabin in the woods, right? So I try and be realistic, because there's also like EMF and fucking there's so many things. So I'm like, you got to live, right? So I try not to even harp too much on the environmental shit. Because how can I limit plastics in the entire tap water? That's one I will say. Tap water's fucked if you can. So you get a water filter, cool. And it can be as simple as go to Bunnings, get just a water filter. You fit an inline filter, put on your shower too. Honestly, that makes a big difference. Tap water is found to have, because 85% of women are on contraceptives, right? So that gets detoxified by the body and flushed through water, and it goes into they found traces of hormones in water. They found traces of heavy metals, chemicals, and solvents, a lot of industrial solvents as well, cosmetics. Everything goes through our water system. Grey water, they recycle it, retreat it, put it back through, but it ends up in. We don't destroy water. It ends up back in water in main. So I guess looking at where you'd want to do tap water, filter the shit out of it as best you can. You can get just benchtop water filters, $150, $200, something like a good one. It'll last you forever, and you just it'll go and just whatever you can do, just filter your water.
Most of the utilities, Hunter Water included, have been adding extra lately because of the wet cycle. Most of the turbidity of the waterways and stuff's pretty bad, so they have to pump more in.
Adding more chemicals and stuff.
More chlorine.
It's actually been a real hard process to try and keep to standard.
Yeah.
Sydney Water's been struggling massively in Sydney.
I think you can smell the chlorine.
Yeah, you can, man.
And
I guess it's also interesting. I remember after I did my thing, when you swim for a long time, or when you so your body just absorbs water, right? So if you go sit in water, like a shower, your body's absorbed. So when you're really dehydrated, actually having a shower or sitting in water where your body can actually absorb that water can help hydrate you quicker without consuming the water. You're not going to shower in filtered water, but
no. Well, so it was I grew up in we had rainwater because we're on a farm, right? So I was but then when I moved to town. And that was 20. So then when I moved to town, I was it's like drinking a swimming pool. But you get used to it, so you don't really notice over time. But I did. I was what the fuck's this stuff? It was drinking solvent. So so it was a really, and you notice out west, for example, it's all bore water, so it's very alkaline. And they can really, and they get a lot of calcium, magnesium build up on the taps and all that. So you sit around all the taps, get all, so it's all bore out there. So I used to work in groundwater stuff.
You won't get a lather, it doesn't lather up.
It was because I used to do a lot of work out on the cotton fields out in Breezer and Gunnedah and Boggabri and all that sort of stuff, and it was all bore water there, and I did all their groundwater analysis and stuff too, and really what they call it, soft water, so high magnesium, calcium, good for you though, a lot of trace minerals in it, but
with the water, it's because it's an interesting conversation. Obviously they pump the chemicals and stuff into it. Filtrate, is it more the chemicals in the water or the pH or a combination of both?
Seems to be more the chemicals, man, because pH is an interesting conversation around. The body sits between 6.8, 7.3 pH. If it goes up or down from there, you're in a really bad place because it's so tightly regulated. Yeah. You have to have a massive, acute, fucking life-threatening thing for your blood pH to change much, because it buffers it around your body, compartmentalizes it, and constantly buffers the acid in your blood. So the whole alkaline craze thing that's bullshit. They were going you can be inflamed and acidic. No, acid is crucial, but your body constantly moves acid around alkalize or acidify where it needs. So don't worry about the whole pH conversation, alkaline water and stuff. It's like our body is a set pH and it sets its own and it regulates it itself. You're not going to have 600 mil of something that's, pH of 11 instead and influence the, like 12 litres of blood we have at pH. So I wouldn't worry about too much about pH, but it's just more. It just seems more like the chemical presence, right? It sounds like you're in water. I was in did a lot of potable testing and stuff like that as well, and was looking at particularly turbidity was a problem, but I looked at when you had primary, secondary, and tertiary treatments of water plants and how much was applied, and to be fair, it's the only way we can think of how to do it, because if you look at trying to sterilize a huge body of water, a huge volume of water going to make sure they don't get have any issues with E. coli or strep or any sort of you have to kill it, you have to just nuke it with chlorine as a general. So it's it's not even, it's probably the best solution we could think of at the time, but it's just unfortunately we didn't think of what happens when you have 100 years of chronic chlorine and fluoride consumption en masse alongside all the other things that then we don't understand and dissipate in water. So yeah, it's more like the hundreds and hundreds of chemicals and things that are in there than the actual pH or any other sort of issue. What do you do in water, man? Are you?
My sister works for Sydney Water, which is senior scientist. But
interesting.
Yeah,
that's cool. I did environmental chemistry was my background before I did this stuff. So I find it really interesting. Hey.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, a bit of a science background in the family, so
cool.
It's knowledge insight there.
It's fun.
But I know they've been struggling from the moment they collect it. The dams are silting up, so they're trying to manage the amount of siltation,
of course,
building up, and then they've got problems with filtering, so they're changing filters now. They almost can't keep up.
Yeah, of course, because the much rainwater we've had recently, how much they just dump
filters first, and then they go into the whole pumping with chlorine and then UV. It's been a difficult couple of years for sure.
So many floods. Mate, hard, hey?
You're right. I mean, and we're kind of lucky, really, in Australia. And when I say lucky, we also get really lazy because of this. Europeans, have really mastered water usage and recycling and management, because they're constantly pushing it down to someone who's going to be taking it just downstream. Whereas we collect and use and push to the ocean and kind of don't care. So we're only just catching up with rural areas going to tertiary treatment plants. There's still been primary treatment plants in Australia operating for the last 30 years. It's fucking atrocious. Basically pumping raw sewage. All a primary treatment plant does is collect
solids. Just pull solids out. Yeah, it's
still been doing that.
You might not be drinking shit, but you might be drinking shit particles. So you're saying?
If you take a mouthful down the surf, sure.
Think of all the nutrients.
The answer in the 80s was to increase the length, the distance we discharged.
Yeah. So I just pushed it further.
And much closer to the larger current that sweeps past Australia, so really get rid of it.
Just get this out to sea, get it gone. Yeah, deal with it. Crazy. But there's some of the more lifestyle ones, eh? Yeah.
Awesome. Anyone else got any questions before we wrap it up?
Million questions. But
Really
no,
good.
that's
Give us your best one.
no,
Confused, he says.
I need to absorb it all.
Glenn?
No, it's just more of an observation that there's no magic bullet for testosterone up. You know what I mean?
Well,
with every other, if you've
Feel
got
stress.
loads, if you've got something you can take a supplement for.
with that, that's normally where this part of it goes. But I don't really undersell you guys, and I don't want to. But in terms of that's where that normally goes. As I say, there are very good herbs with very good data showing very statistically significant increases in tests. So there is, I guess. But the more holistic approach is with the dieting piece is you have to try and tie it into the lifestyle part, because if you've got an absolute train wreck of a lifestyle, I can only out supplement so much. I can buy a hack a lot of shit, but I can't buy a hack. A huge. So you got to give me a bit of a fighting chance. So I'll throw in things that'll show very significant increases in testosterone, for example, and then it's it's synergistic. If you work it synergistically along the lifestyle, it's mad. But it'll still boot it regardless. Like if you like, I got guys who are still shift workers, they'll drink, they'll drink 2 cartons a week and eat shit, and I can still get them up a bit, but it's like if they worked with me, it would be heaps easier. But yeah, it's still like it's probably the closest thing now. The particular herbs that we play with, Tomcat, Bulbine's really good, ashwagandha. Those ones are like ones that you can literally give the closest thing to like change nothing else and show blood work increases.
I think I'll eat up, sure. Because environmentally in my life, I feel like I do my best. Like I do my best, and I reckon I would still be statistically low.
Yeah, of course.
We don't go on a train wreck either.
No, I don't.
I have some of these major fucking symptoms, and have for ages.
Of course.
Ages.
Yep. It'd be around for years, man. And that's the annoying part. It's like at first it's like a whisper, then it becomes a dull roar over time, but it takes a while to become a dull roar, right? Because you're like at first it's like you don't notice a tiny slip of motivation or a 0.5% decrease in willpower or a tiny decrease in libido but over 20 years then all of a sudden you get to the end point, you're like, how am I so depressed and upset and suicidal and holding fat everywhere and all this sort of shit here? But it only becomes usually, especially with us, usually females are a bit luckier. They'll come to a seminar when they're only like a little bit fucked, but then like with us, we wait until we're properly broken, and then I see them and they're like, "All right, man, sorry, I'm fried. I'm like properly cooked." And I'll get guys who's like the stubborn old shift worker who's like got autoimmune diseases and so like whereas at least like the women will come to me first and they're like, "Oh, I'm a bit out." I'm like, "Cool, we can fix you real quick." Then I'll get the guy who's like been cooked for like 20 years and like, "All right, we're gonna dig you out of a hole." So we can, but it's good. It's good to try and be proactive with it because the less of a hole you dig, the quicker you get to optimal, right? But the cool thing is, the lower you are, the quicker you respond to the herb. Because a lot of data on the herbs, you hyper respond if you're low. So like if you look at if you're close to optimal, if optimal's here and you're here, you'll get a slight response to optimal, right? But if you're like what we call hypergonadal, so low testosterone, right? You hyper respond because you get a stimulus, that luteinizing hormone boots back on, and it goes, "Oh shit, I have bugger all test," buzz, and it boots it. So that's where I'll normally see those weird ones where I get like old mate who's in his 20s at like 9. I got him straight up like 15 is nearly double, right? Had they like a month because he was so low, and at his age should be much higher. His body, when it finally put the signals back on, boot, it just went buzz. So it works better the lower it is. So you'd actually hyper respond much better in that case. It's like metabolism. When I put people on things that stimulate metabolism, if they're slow, they get like really hot, really quick, start sweating all the time, start dropping weight like mad. Because like the slower things are, the more you hyper respond to it. At least according to the literature, anyway. That's how it normally goes.
More kids, man.
It's bizarre in the mental health space.
I'm a killer.
The thing is, bizarre in the mental health space that's not checked.
Right. This is the most fascinating thing, right? So I met Nerida about last year, and I went into a pretty horrific, fucked up breakup to really get to a point where I went, okay, I'm going to look at this self-awareness part of this too, and the mental health part of this as well. It took all that, like it took a divorce, being homeless, and a kid, and then 8 years of business breaking me to then go, all right, I'll look at what's the handbrake here, right? So I looked at all the biology for the last 10 years and all this stuff, and had zero awareness around like what does the mental health part do, what's mindset do, what does breathing do, any of that. She goes like, fuck that, I'll just like supplement her. I'll find an enzyme or a pathway, or I'll just out science it, right? And then I put it together recently, and I've started going like really into this, and then I'm like, like you can't have good mental health without dopamine, right? But so the conversation is, and you can't have a good energy that you put out, for example. Well, if you're running on nervous energy, i.e. adrenaline, you can't. So it's like they're all speaking this, like I was saying at the very top, it's all the same language, but it was the missing piece. I only knew I only knew the textbook part of it. I didn't know the other part. Now I'm hearing it though. It's fascinating because we never talk about it, right? Because people who are in the self-healing, the self-awareness, the mindset, motivate these people, and then you've got the chemists and the endocrinologists and all. We're never in the same room often, right? Very rarely. So, but now I've been in the same room as a lot of people in that area. It's like amazing because I can have conversations with them that are like, and just fucking everything. So it's click. It's like the missing piece of the puzzle just finally just put back together. I'm like, oh, you talking about energy over here, was that, and what part of your brain you access, and how you like what trauma does and how that plays out, like what did all that shit just like, oh, but it makes so much sense. But we should talk heaps more, man. Like fucking heaps more because we don't. We're so separate. Like there's like this whole like we talk over here and we talk only like just what I spoke about. And then there's like guys over there, it's all about, like inner child work and trauma and healing and mindset, motivation and stuff. It's like if you put that together though, then you could make like a really coherent conversation And I think as men too, we like logic. So we like to be explained what chemically happens when we improve. If you like, for example, like releasing trauma, what does that do to your nervous system? What does that do chemically? What does that do to tests? What does that do to? I imagine you could have like an actual linear, logical conversation. I could say, well, if you worked on, X amount of trauma, say, and you could then quantify what it will do for you, not just saying, oh, you'll feel better. You'll feel released and so on. Well, what's holding the tension? That basal wired nervous system. What's that? That's cortisol, right? What's that do? It's so much better when we have both parts of the combo, but it's just that none of us talk with each other, so we don't ever we just ships the night with it,
Yeah, it's what I was sort of alluding to before is like some people like aren't ready to let go of things, and a lot of the time that can be body fat or can be other parts of your life. It's like. Yeah, I find that really the physiology and psychology part of that is when you can empower someone to let go of something that might be minor, how that helps them potentially let go of weight or whatever it is, because like I said, it's all protection, right? It's how do we protect ourselves. So yeah, I'm really interested in that side of things as well as like training I guess people training to be able to let go of things. Because if you're just holding on to stuff, if you're holding stress, you're holding all this, like you just doesn't matter what you do with training, like it'll just compound or just won't do anything.
Yeah, well, what crutches you're leaning on, same thing.
Yeah.
Like for years I knew that alcohol just wasn't good for me.
Yep.
But, I just was never a good drinker. And I just couldn't, I just wasn't ready to let it go.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it took ages.
Yeah, it does too. Because unfortunately, it feels like in the short term it might be helpful too. Is the real kicker of alcohol? It's a fucker as well. Because then you lower the testosterone in the background too, and increase the stress acutely. But it does it whilst boosting GABA, and GABA is a neurotransmitter that inhibits stress in the short term, perceived stress, right? So it inhibits perception of stress.
Yeah, so it
Distorts it, right? So it distorts the perception of stress. So it reduces perceived stress, increases acute stress, and then lowers testosterone, and low test cause more stress, cause low dopamine, cause low mood. What do you do when you have low mood, high stress, low test? You drink. Round and around we go, right? And if people just dig themselves into this fucking grave, man, it's terrible. I get them when they're properly there, but I try and get people before they're there, but it's hard because it feels like the right thing in the moment, right? Get over work, massive day, fuck it. It feels logical, but it's...
And our generation had parents that, drinking was what you did.
Oh man, my folks were ragged on me for years. And I worked in cellar doors when I was young. I worked in wineries too, and so a big part of my background was around that too, and in mining. That was their way of coping, man, for night shift. On the way home from site, they were drinking long necks on the way home, popping Restovits. Like popping sleeping pills whilst drinking long necks whilst driving home.
Yeah.
That was their way of winding down from a night shift to sleep, is just fucking literally sleeping pills and booze. And they did that and would do that for and that's just normal part. It's like, oh mate, you're getting the 3-pack this time, we're getting a half carton. It's like it was like a dick measuring contest, It was like this is fucked. And so when that was the first thing I made. One of the first things I made was a stress thing, because I was like,
talk about rites of passage. For decades in this country we've diminished rites of passage. So the only strong rites of passage as we're going through teenage years is alcohol culture.
Yeah.
Our parents inadvertently were jamming it down our throats without actually doing that.
yeah.
Intentionally.
Mine,
Semi-intentionally.
yeah, mine would be open about that. I'll drink my weak pussies. But yeah, no, that's a valid point. But hey, it's a kicker that piece, man. You see people in socials does it now as well, like phones and stuff. The ability to have something you can constantly distract yourself with and numb it. It's a crutch, isn't it, man? It's always that. It's such a readily accessible, constant thing that'll give you a constant dopamine hit too, which will offset some of that short term. But it's this easy thing anyone can grab at any second of the day.
Actually, I had an example today. I was sitting in a waiting room and I saw a bloke and just did not want to talk to him. Like, lovely fella, but I didn't have the mental capacity to talk to him. So I quickly grabbed my phone and
Yeah.
pretended that he wasn't there. And it was a crutch. It got me through the situation and it worked. But it's not right either. It's just it's there. It's always on you.
It is. That's what changed me, I think, as well, about the baseline background stress. But jobs used to be able to be you just did the job and left, and that was it. Or business was that, and employees were that. In fact, people couldn't reach you, man. I'm not I'm in my 30s, so it was like you had to ring the fucking home phone and ask the parents to speak to the person. There was a barrier to the world. You got home, and it was like, all right, world off. And now it's like everyone, employees can get you to, and then, man, it's nuts. And they're your time. It is. Everything's urgent, right? Everything's like right now. I need to know now, and then and people can catch you any time of the day, and you always get emails and texts and notifications, and it's just stimuli. And your body doesn't know the difference between like the life-threatening thing and a stressful call or text you don't want to see. There's no difference chemically. It's identical response. Yeah.
I recently I gave one of the guys at work my personal phone number.
Oh no.
And I said he was telling me he needed this bloody order approved. I was going to be in Sydney. I said, Greg can do it. Greg's away. Fucking Andy can do it. Andy's fucking in a meeting all afternoon. Right. Well, I don't carry my work phone around with me when I'm not at work. Right. So I'm going to give you my personal number and you can use it once. He said, right. He said, what's the big deal? And I said, mate, you don't understand. When I get home from work, I put my work phone in my bedside table and I don't take it out till Monday morning.
Yeah, that's healthy, man. I like that.
But I'm on the other phone all the time. So it's a bit healthy.
But it's not work.
That is good. That's actually I quite like that because that's my problem is a lot of my people I started business with years ago was mates of mine sort of thing. So, but I never separated it from work phone and home phone. I probably should, to be honest. So it'd probably be a good thing.
I didn't welcome it when it first happened, but I've done it so many times where you get a phone, make it your phone, and then you've got to separate your whole life, and redo your whole phone with the next company. And it happened 3 times in 4 years, and I thought, well, fuck it, I'll just keep the work phone separate. So it has that benefit. Now,
good boundary.
I do check it from time to time, especially if I'm off for a week or something. Every second day I'll pull it out, see what's in there, flick anything that's instant.
It's a kick in now being single, man. When I was in a relationship, it broke down at the start of the year. But last year I was really good at putting a boundary at like 5 p.m. phone off, done. And which is nothing I'd ever done in business before. But it was great because I was like putting a healthy, and then all my staff knew you can't come after 5. At first they were pissed off, like, oh, answer. But after they realised I just didn't answer the phone for like, a week goes by, then a month, then like, oh, okay, well, I just can't get the boss after 5. And then, it was really healthy. Now I'm single again, I'm finding myself slipping back in the old habit because I'm like, well, there's no need to. It has its own distractions, but it's fucked. It's like brought that barrier down because I put that in to be respected, so I'd have some quality time, be present with my partner, right? Like I don't want to be that shitbag who's just scrolling all the time and not in the room, So it's like, all right, I'll try and be an actual present partner. But now I'm single, it's like taking away that need for that. I'm like, oh, what am I really protecting here, I suppose? And then, but I remember why I did it now because it creates this. Then it just it's like the flood walls broke. And now at the end, and now on the phone late 8:30 at night. So I'm not in bed asleep at 8:30, not on the phone at 8:30. And I'm like, that's why I did this. This is fucking bad. This like makes you never switch off.
It's interesting that you gave that space to your partner, but you wouldn't now give that space to yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like, you at 5 o'clock, you turn it off to give that time to your partner. But now you're single, you're not. You wouldn't. It's just interesting how we treat ourselves differently.
That's really like a self-worth piece, isn't it? That might be like a self-value piece there, to think about.
Maybe.
I hadn't actually thought like that. You're right, eh? Even though I said that then, wasn't it? It was like
really clear the way you said it.
Yeah, to me, it's
told that story.
But
it's like I don't value my time. Maybe it's a self-value piece. Yeah.
When I was with hotels, they expect you to be available.
Yeah.
Head office expect you, and if head office is global.
Yeah.
You got to be available. Yeah. So, but even then, people's habits. Like there was a girl in Sydney, and then she moved to Singapore, and she would get all her shit off the desk on Friday afternoon, and so all her shit would land on my desk on Friday afternoon and other people's. And I ended up, she sent this email to a bunch of GMs, like 40 of us across Asia Pacific, and I replied all, and I said, Veronique, please stop this practice of moving your desk onto my desk at 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon. You know I look at my phone all the time. Please reserve this email. Draft it by all means, but don't press send till Monday morning. Thank you. And she talked to me for ages. Finally, I saw her at a conference and she came up, she said, I'm so sorry, man. I didn't realise I was doing that. I said, oh, well, I told you, so we're good. She said, yeah. And these other GMs.
I realised I was moving my shit to your desk.
It's funny when you said that. You've said it so it's all right, but right. That's a big difference I've noticed to have male staff and female staff. We can say something and it's done, you can close it. That doesn't work in the opposite, unfortunately. But because with my guys, they're very dominant A-type personality, like they're very just driven fuckers, right? But they're also quite reactive because they're all sales reps. They all like minute to minute, and they fly off the hinge at like nothing. But they dump it, and then they're done. Like they can have like a massive world-ending issue. They'll like blow it out, but then it's done. It's like, oh no, it's cool now. It's solved. I've said it. I've said a piece, done. I close it off. And I think, but it's funny, and it makes sense when I looked at all this stuff before. Why women, unfortunately, they struggle with that because that estrogen blocks the off switch from the stress part, so it internalizes, and it takes a long time to actually switch off that actual like stress signal from a confrontation or from a thing. It doesn't switch off the same way as men's does, whereas our testosterone allows that switch to happen, and until you can like dump stress out.
What about it's changing as we're
Well, yes, because we're becoming more estrogenic and less testosterone driven, right?
dealing with shit less?
Bingo.
Yeah.
More form.
100%. Hence the more stress, depression, suicide, anxiety. Yeah, 100%, man. 100%. Yep.
Yeah, and then it feeds everything, doesn't it? Depression,
Yep.
self-worth,
Yes.
anxiety, self-worth.
We just got to go get some of those testosterone patches.
Sweet.
Kind of one relationship though, because there's the amount of stresses that we look at as orders of magnitude more. There's, orders of magnitude more information that we're presented with every day than someone in the 1970s was presented with, and that's just one part. This
Well
complex interconnected systems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's
Well said. It is, and particularly in the 70s. So it was like in newspapers, they actually put out like the amount of information we see in a day in terms of like text, calls, emails, stimulus, advertising, like everything, right? Like scrolling words. They added all up the amount of like messaging it is, put it into a text format, and it was equivalent of 146 newspapers a day. Was what it was. Now it was only equivalent of like 4 a day in the 70s. So you're right, 100%, man.
Yeah.
The inundation of information is fucking wild.
It's really interesting. I had this conversation with my missus because she's been noticing, over the last few years that I'm becoming a bit less attentive. And we're having this conversation. I said, I have to filter so much during the day at work and, our devices and stuff. Like I'm constantly just going, no, don't need it. They find it hard to then go home and go, right, I've got to be completely attentive. Like kids, wife,
Present.
present.
It's part of the brain, doesn't it?
Because there's so much information, we can't take it all in.
No.
So we're actually going, okay, we can't. Oh yeah, I need that. No. Oh yeah, I need that.
There's a remarkable book called Stolen Focus I'll have to bring in next time. It's exactly on that, how we have so much more information coming now, and we have to learn how to filter better. Because our brain can only focus on between 1 and 3 tasks in a given time, but it works optimally on 1. And at worst 2, 3 is like, none of this is going to get done.
Yeah, multitasking should be out the window.
Not actually a thing. Multitasking isn't genuinely a thing.
Yeah.
It's not. It's a fallacy because nothing actually gets done. It's like it's like the sitting picture of
They get nowhere.
Yeah, nowhere. And you see it all the time, man. Like the real people who are just like manic, running around doing a million, and you look at their like job lists, it's never complete. Like it's always like a million half done, half cooked pies, But yeah.
I think that's the thing, and that's why I guess we value things like mountain biking or working on a boat or a piece of machinery or going for a ride or run or like it's like I had someone once tell me it's like you cannot think about anything else while you're cycling up the steepest hill you can find besides breathing out your ass. You cannot think of anything else because it's just too hard. So and I guess I think mountain biking is a good example. You're so hyper focused on everything, particularly as you go quicker. You become like in flow, right? And I think that's this single focus, being in flow aspect. And yeah, you're right. Like we have more information and more to filter. And I guess the idea is the more we can eliminate as best we can those things and the distractions and stuff, arguably the better off we'll be. But yeah, that flow piece, I think that's why we crave doing things like that so much and why they're so important to us. Is because the rest of our 23 hours a day, or not that because you're sleeping, but yeah, you're so wired and there's so much going on. You just need those times of flow, and if you can make more things like flow,
it's
probably going to be better off. Yeah,
We had a training manager in town, the hotel, and he was manic, like just a super high achiever, super ambitious, wanted to do all of it now, You know, what else can I do? I've got 27 things over there, Matt, but I'm ready for more. What else can I do? I got a mate of mine to come and talk to us about wellness. And he asked who in the room had ever done any meditation. And I said, I've done some meditation. And Mitchell went, yeah. And Lincoln asked him, he said, when do you meditate? He said, mainly when I'm at the gym. And Link said, okay. Explain, describe your meditation to me. He said, oh, usually it's the treadmill. I'm on the treadmill, and when I get on the treadmill, that's it. I don't think about anything else. Da, da, da. And Link said, mate, you're talking about focus.
Yeah.
Not meditation.
Yeah.
He said, when else do you focus on one thing during the day? He said, oh, mate, never. I've always got 10 things going. But so many people are like that.
Yeah.
And the pressure to be like that.
Yeah, it's rewarded too, like I said, right? Because it has to be, doesn't it?
Pressure to be that is huge.
I mean, like
You must be able to do multiple things at once perfectly well at quality.
it's a real kicker because they timed the amount of the amount of time that it takes to get back to flow state. So flow is like a fascinating topic for me, and it was from a distraction. So if you're like in this conversation now, if you just go check your phone, say break concentration, go back into it. It takes 13 minutes to get back to the same level of concentration you were before. So we're all like engaged in the conversation, eye contact, into it, right? Energy's there, everyone's in it. Stop phone, just look for a text for a second. Where was the guy? Sorry, oh yeah, cool. 13 minutes to reach the same level of buy-in and concentration as what you were before. They did it on a, and some like corporate giants in the States were really interested in what this meant for worker productivity. And they found the average, they're like in a 9 to 5, the most undisturbed time they could get was 58 minutes out of an entire 8-hour day for their workers. So as in like the only time spent in flow was 50 minutes a day out of 9 to 5. And in the higher up management went, the less it was, to the point where they got to usually senior management, it was 0 minutes a day were undisturbed. And we're like constantly in this like distracted state of half scattered, half multitasking. 0 minutes a day out of a full 8-hour day. So a 40-hour week, there's 0 actual flow state, which is where all creativity, deeper thought, everything, the high leverage shit comes from but we never access it. And I see that so much in my time. You're just like going through you're on autopilot. You're just in survival, right? And then you get a breather, you get a Saturday morning, oh, cool, all right. And everything floods you, all the cool ideas and creativity and all the good shit happens, and all the presence. Presence is a big one.
For me, that's what the people who like to work late, it's probably because it's the only time they can actually focus. I know for me, it's the only time I've actually got. I was like, I need to get this task done, and I'm ultra focused on that. It's like, well, that's my product, and I'm like, geez, I'm so productive at 9 o'clock at night. Well, yeah, you are, because not in comparison to how you could be in the morning, but compared to all your distractions throughout the day, yeah, you probably are. And then the second thing it triggered with me was just the work week. I think there's been a bunch of organisers. They did a big study in Australia. I think in Australia, that 4-day week. Yeah. And not
the Scandinavian countries there.
Yeah, but there was a big Australian one, and they said 90%. I think they said 90% of the companies that trialled it have adopted it beyond trial, 4-day week. So I think there's more of that stuff sort of coming. And it's like, but it's setting up the environment, right? Setting up the environment and stuff. Yeah.
Expectations is coming out a lot more now. Actually, funny you use that word. That's really interesting. That's becoming a big thing of like expectation is the death of satisfaction. Seems to be this this one that I listened to today. It's a cool podcast. Because you put this huge expectation of perfection on something, or on that's what I did. That's what I keep catching myself doing now. That I'm because I've never looked at any self-awareness stuff. So now I'm like, I want to learn. I love learning, so I just consume it all. But then you have this expectation of trying to get to the golden standard or the perfection of it. But I guess the human experience isn't perfection, but the expectation of being perfect mind fucks you, because then you discard, like you said, you're tracking, right? You're out by 500 calories or something today. But then you discard the entire experience because it wasn't perfect once. But it would be unreasonable to think humans can be perfect, but we seek it, and it fucks the whole framing that we have our whole life around. Because you go, the 1% that you're not perfect for then puts a whole negative spin on the other 99% that you were doing really well. Like tracking, training, it's really fascinating. That's a big one. Expectation is spot on, man.
Yeah, Dave talks about it a fair bit around father and son program and stuff like that. It's a really important conversation to have, and it's a conversation to have with a group of some team building stuff with this week was like, all right, what are your expectations of yourself? And what are your expectations on, say, if you're my boss, what are your expectations on you? And did we agree that those are the expectations and the standards that we wanted to hold? And if there was no agreement, how do we hold each other? Like, there's no accountability, but why would I be angry at Glenn if I said, oh, we've got this talk on tonight, Roland, and he rolls in at 6:10, and I get annoyed that he wasn't here at 6. It was like, well, we didn't agree that was the expectation that he rolled in at 6 o'clock, right? So there's that piece. But I just finished reading this book called The Gap and the Gain, and it just talks about like exactly what you just said about we discount everything that's happened. We look at this ideal. We look at this ideal that's like, this is the ideal outcome. Earn $100,000 a year, whatever it is. That's the ideal outcome. Right now, I'm earning 20. And then next time you look at the goal or look at USS, it's like, oh, I'm at $60,000. It's like, well, man, I just beat myself up because I'm not 100 grand. So, but you're like, so it's like it's like, are you living the gap, which is the gap between where you are now or your goal and the ideal, or you're looking at the gain of where you were from and where you got to. Right?
The goals are negative until you achieve it.
Yeah.
Growth's always positive.
Yeah, exactly.
I really like that.
Yeah. I had a dinosaur guy who was a mentor in hotels, and he was an absolute fucking dinosaur. Drank like 10 men, smoked, swore, was abusive. He was a fucking pig of a man. But he was brilliant in many, many ways. And surprising because he was really gruff, and he was 6'6", and he was a huge bloke, and he sort of walked like this, and he always had a fucking scare on his face. Anyway, he was the guy that saw potential in me and sort of pushed me into doing things that I probably wouldn't have otherwise done. But 2 times he really surprised me. One was an ongoing conversation, which I learned a lot from, but the other one was the first time he ever said to me, "You need to be a general manager." I'd run the Crown Plaza Hunter Valley as food and beverage director, and we just opened it. And Bill came up because the GM was leaving, and I didn't realise at the time, he was sussing me out to be acting GM while we transitioned. And we were going to open 150 new villas, which was that North Village. And anyway, so we're sitting down, he's having a cigarette. In the bar, you weren't allowed to smoke in the bar. This is what kind of guy he was. It's me, fuck off, give me an ashtray. Whatever, the guests are complaining, tell them to move away. So just dinosaur, stupid, horrible stuff that was bad, and I didn't learn from that. But I learned from some other things. During this talk, so Matt, tell me about this, tell me about this. And then he said the most unexpected thing, because he's a gruff, hard taskmaster, old-fashioned dictator. And he said, "How often do you pick your kids up from school?" I said, "What?" He said, "How often do you pick your kids up from school?" I said, "Mate, I live in Newcastle. It's 50 minutes drive." "Never." He said, "Bullshit, never." He said, "No." I said, "No, never." He said, "Mate, you need to pick them up from school twice a week, minimum. Just fucking organise them." "Right, how do I do that?" "Leave work." Leave work early and go pick your fucking kids up.
Yeah.
You're a senior fucking manager, Matt. You should be able to sort that out. Right. Okay. And the other one he said later to a group of us was when do you do your creative work? Oh, well, I fit it in. When do you do your creative work? This guy he would have been 62, 63. He said, "Friday afternoons, everybody knows not to fucking disturb me between 12 and 3 because I lock myself in a fucking conference room. And if you come in and disturb me while I'm in there, fucking God help you." And he said, and that's where I just think about what fucking else can we do?
Yeah.
Not what's broken, not what's on my desk, not what am I doing next week. If I had the power to do fucking anything next week or next month, what would it be? What can we do with this fucking hotel company that nobody else has ever done? He said, between 12 and 3 on Friday afternoons, I think about that shit. He said, and then I go to the bar.
That's unreal. That's fun. I like that. Didn't
Purposeful creativity, purposeful advantage time.
Thanks for listening to the Junto Men's podcast. Our mission is to share high quality information for regular blokes who either want to be better or who might be going through some tough stuff. We really hope you got some value out of listening today. There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So if you did get some value out today, we'd love it if you left us a comment, we read them all, shared it with a mate, or even gave us a 5-star review. We love getting that. If any of what we have spoken about today is interesting to you and you'd like to know more about what we're about and what we do, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or on our website. We'll hopefully talk to you soon. Cheers.